Chapter: The Mind They Never Taught You About. There is a man sitting in a prison cell in 1924. He has nothing but time, and time, for him, has become a weapon. He is not planning an escape. He is planning a conquest. While the world outside sleeps comfortably in its assumptions, this man is building something invisible, something that will later set half of Europe on fire. His name is Adolf Hitler. And before you turn away from this story, understand something. This is not a chapter about evil. It is a chapter about the raw, terrifying power of thought. Because Hitler understood something that most people never do. Thought is not passive. Thought is not commentary. Thought is construction. And when a single mind decides to build something with absolute conviction, the world reshapes itself around that conviction. The question is not whether thought has power. The question is whether your thoughts are building something worth living inside. Think about the last argument you had online. You were so sure you were right. You had the facts. You had the links. You had the moral high ground. But here's what you probably didn't have: accuracy. Because most of what we call thinking is not thinking at all. It is rehearsing opinions we borrowed from people we admire. It is defending positions we adopted before we understood them. It is reacting emotionally to information that was designed to trigger exactly that reaction. And we do this all day, every day, for our entire lives. There was a moment in 1948 when the entire United States believed something that wasn't true. The Chicago Daily Tribune ran a headline so confident, so absolute, that it became immortal. Dewey defeats Truman. Except Dewey didn't defeat Truman. Truman won. And the newspaper, along with millions of readers who believed the early reports, had to confront a terrifying reality. They had built an entire worldview on something false, and they had done it without ever questioning the foundation. This is what inaccurate thinking looks like at scale, but it happens inside your mind every single morning. When you check your phone before your feet touch the floor. When you form an opinion about someone based on a 30-second video. When you decide you can't do something because you failed at it once, 5 years ago, under completely different circumstances. Your mind is not a camera, it is a projector. And most of what you see as reality is actually footage you have been editing for years without knowing it. Let me tell you about a different kind of thinker. Jonas Salk was not a charismatic man. He did not give speeches that moved nations. He did not have a magnetic personality or a compelling origin story. He had something quieter, something far more dangerous to the status quo. He had the patience to separate what he knew from what he believed. In the 1950s, polio was paralyzing children across America. Fear was everywhere. Parents wouldn't let their kids swim in public pools. Summer became a season of dread, and the scientific community was chasing solutions in 100 different directions, each one more desperate than the last. Salk did something that looked boring to everyone else. He stopped guessing. He stopped following the loudest voices. He stopped assuming that the conventional wisdom was wise. Instead, he asked a question that almost no one was asking. What do we actually know? Not what do we hope? Not what do we fear? Not what does everyone else think? What do we actually, verifiably, undeniably know? And from that single question, he built a vaccine that changed human history. This is the difference between thinking and accurate thinking. Thinking is what you do when you're alone with your thoughts. Accurate thinking is what you do when you refuse to let your thoughts lie to you. Most people have never been taught how to think. They've been taught what to think. Schools reward memorization. Social media rewards agreement. Families reward conformity. And somewhere along the way, the skill of examining your own mind became a lost art. But here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. Your mind is full of other people's ideas. Your political beliefs were probably formed at a dinner table before you were old enough to vote. Your fears were installed by parents who meant well but were terrified themselves. Your definition of success was downloaded from television shows and Instagram feeds. And you have been defending all of it as if it were original research. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that most people read the way a watchman watches. They are present, but they are not seeing. They scan for confirmation, not for truth. And this is why the world is full of intelligent people living lives they never chose. Because intelligence without accuracy is just a faster way to get lost. Let me take you inside a modern phenomenon that reveals everything about how poorly we think. In the early 1990s, a rumor began spreading across America. People were finding hypodermic needles in Pepsi cans. It started with one report, then 20, then reports from more than 20 states. The stock price of PepsiCo collapsed. Investors sold their shares in panic. People stopped buying Pepsi, and the entire country was gripped by a fear that felt completely rational. Except it wasn't rational. It wasn't even true. The FDA investigated every single report. The FBI got involved, and they found the same thing every time. Hoax. 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 Not one real needle. Not one real victim. Just a story that was too terrifying not to believe. And a population trained to react before they examined. Now, here's what should haunt you. Some people made money that day. Not the panic sellers. Not the frightened consumers. The people who paused. The people who asked a simple question. Is this actually likely?
Accurate thinkers looked at the logistics of mass needle tampering and recognized the improbability. They bought Pepsi stock while everyone else was running. And when the truth came out, they didn't just avoid losses. They gained from other people's inaccuracy. This is not a story about stock trading. It is a story about how expensive it is to think poorly, and how profitable it is to think clearly. There are two kinds of reasoning that live inside every human mind. The first is called inductive reasoning. You see a pattern in a small part of life, and you expand it to explain the whole. Every time you've been hurt by love, you conclude that love is dangerous. Every time you've worked hard and failed, you conclude that hard work doesn't pay. Every time someone from a particular background disappointed you, you quietly expanded that disappointment into a rule about everyone who shares that background. Inductive reasoning is fast, it is emotional, and it is wrong more often than we admit. The second kind is called deductive reasoning. You start with something you know to be true, and you build conclusions from that foundation. But here's the problem. Most people's foundations are not foundations at all. They are assumptions wearing the costume of facts. So accurate thinking requires something harder than either form of reasoning. It requires the willingness to separate facts from everything else, from opinions, from fiction, from the stories we tell ourselves to sleep better at night. Think about your own mind for a moment. How many of your strongest beliefs have you actually verified? Not defended, not repeated, not argued for at parties. Actually verified. If you're honest, the number is probably smaller than you'd like. And that's okay, because awareness is the beginning of accuracy. There is a habit that accurate thinkers develop that looks strange to everyone else. They question everything. Not out of cynicism, out of respect. When someone tells them something with absolute confidence, they don't feel impressed. They feel suspicious. Because confidence is cheap, evidence is expensive, and most people are selling the first while pretending to have the second. This doesn't make accurate thinkers cold. It makes them free. Free from the manipulation of marketers who engineer fear. Free from the control of politicians who weaponize outrage. Free from the quiet desperation of living inside a mind that has never been cleaned. Because your mind is like a room. You can fill it with anything. But if you never open the windows, never sweep the floors, never question what you've allowed inside, eventually you stop noticing the smell. And most people have stopped noticing. Let me leave you with a question that changed how I see everything. There was a governor of Tennessee named Robert Taylor. He once asked a young man why he was a committed Democrat.
The young man answered with the kind of certainty that most people mistake for thought. I live in Tennessee. My father was a Democrat. My grandfather was a Democrat. That's why. Taylor looked at him and asked something devastating. Wouldn't you be in a bad fix if your father and grandfather had been horse thieves? The point is not about politics. The point is about inheritance. We inherit ideas the way we inherit eye color, without choosing them, without examining them, and then we spend our lives defending them as if they were the product of our own wisdom. Accurate thinking is the process of finally choosing, not accepting, not inheriting, choosing. So here is the practice, not the theory, the actual practice. Before you accept any piece of information as fact, ask yourself 6 questions. 1. Is the source of this information actually qualified to speak on this subject? Not famous, not confident, qualified. 2. Does this person have a motive beyond simply sharing truth? Because even honest people can be honest in directions that serve their interests. 3. Do they have something to gain if I believe this? Money, power, validation, attention. 4. Are they a fanatic about this subject? Because fanatics are useful for energy, but dangerous for accuracy. 5. Can I verify what they're saying from sources I trust? Not sources that agree with me. Sources that have earned my trust through repeated accuracy. And 6. Does this actually make sense? Not does it feel good. Not does it confirm what I already believe. Does it actually make sense when I strip away emotion and look at it coldly? If you ask these 6 questions consistently, something will happen to you. You will become slower to form opinions. And slower is not a weakness. In a world addicted to instant reactions, slowness is power. You will become quieter in arguments. Not because you've lost confidence, but because you've lost confidence. Realize that most arguments are just 2 people defending borrowed thoughts, and you will become more dangerous. Not to society, to the illusions that society sells. There is a final truth about accurate thinking that almost no one talks about. It is lonely. When you start thinking accurately, you will disagree with people you love. You will see through stories that comfort your friends. You will recognize manipulation in places that everyone else calls culture. And you will be tempted, constantly, to go back to sleep, to believe the comfortable lie, to join the chorus of certainty. But once you have seen the mechanism of your own mind, you cannot unsee it. Once you have felt the clarity of a thought that is actually yours, borrowed certainty feels like chains. The man in the prison cell built an empire of destruction because he understood the power of thought. Jonas Salk built a shield against paralysis because he understood the discipline of accurate thought. The power is the same. The direction is everything.
And the choice of direction is made in quiet moments, when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when you are alone with your own mind, and you finally ask yourself the question that matters most. Is this true, or do I just need it to be? In the next chapter, we explore something even more rare than accurate thought, the ability to hold that thought long enough for it to become something real. Because in a world designed to fracture your attention, the person who can focus is the person who can build anything. But focus is not what you think it is. It is not willpower. It is not discipline. It is something deeper, something almost no one understands. End of chapter 1. The Art of Undivided Focus. Your phone buzzed while you were reading the last sentence. Didn't it? Or maybe it didn't. But you thought about checking it. That thought alone is the subject of this chapter. There is a company in California that manufactures something you have never seen. You have never held it. You have never searched for it. But it is inside almost every device you own. It is called a microprocessor. And the company that makes the best ones in the world is called Intel. In the 1980s, Intel made memory chips. They were good at it, profitable, respected. And then a young executive named Andy Grove asked a terrifying question. What would happen if we stopped doing everything else and only made microprocessors? The room went silent. Because what he was suggesting was corporate suicide. They would abandon their core business. They would bet everything on a market that barely existed. They would become a company with one product, one focus, one obsession. And they did it. By the 1990s, Intel had quadrupled the speed of computer processors. Not incrementally, not safely, relentlessly. Year after year, they concentrated every resource, every mind, every dollar on making chips faster. They didn't make software. They didn't make computers. They didn't diversify into modems or monitors or any of the 1,000 things they could have chased. They put all their eggs in one basket, and then they guarded that basket with everything they had. There is a designer in New York named Donna Karan. In the 1980s, the fashion world was chasing everything. Jeans, swimwear, fragrances, licensing deals. The industry believed that expansion meant survival, that more products meant more security. Karan did the opposite. She decided to dress one kind of woman, the professional woman, the woman who walked into boardrooms and needed to own the room without saying a word. She didn't make casual wear. She didn't make evening gowns. She made power, stitched into fabric, tailored into silhouettes that commanded respect before a single word was spoken. And because she refused to divide her attention, because she concentrated on one woman and one context, she dominated a market that everyone else was too distracted to see clearly. And because
there is a psychological phenomenon that explains why most people will never achieve what they want. It is not laziness. It is not lack of talent. It is not even bad luck. It is the myth of diversification. The comforting lie that safety lives in having many options. Your grandfather probably told you not to put all your eggs in one basket. It is ancient wisdom. It feels true. It sounds prudent. But here is what no one tells you. That advice was designed for farmers carrying eggs to market, not for minds building empires. When you divide your attention among 10 different goals, you are not playing it safe. You are ensuring mediocrity in all 10. The person who focuses on one thing, who pours every resource into a single basket, who guards that basket with obsessive attention, is not taking a risk. they are taking the only path that leads anywhere worth going. Think about your own life right now. How many projects are you working on? How many side hustles? How many skills you're developing? How many books you're reading? Now be honest. How many of them are actually moving? Not how many have potential. Not how many you've told people about. How many are actually, measurably, moving forward? If you're like most people, the answer is none, or maybe one. And that one is moving slowly, because it is fighting for attention with everything else. This is the hidden cost of divided attention. It doesn't just slow you down, it makes you invisible. Ooh. There is a French novelist named Marcel Proust. He spent 14 years writing one book. Not a series, not a franchise. One continuous work. 7 volumes. 3,000 pages. He didn't write articles on the side. He didn't maintain a social presence. He didn't diversify his creative output. He concentrated his entire existence on one question. What is memory? And in answering that question with absolute, undivided attention, he created something that redefined literature. Something that outlived him by a century and will outlive us by many more. Proust understood something that the modern world has forgotten. Depth is the only thing that lasts. And depth requires the one thing that the attention economy is designed to steal from you. Sustained focus. Let me tell you about the architecture of your own distraction. Every notification on your phone is engineered to break your concentration, not by accident, by design. The people who built these systems studied the psychology of addiction. They know that variable rewards, unpredictable interruptions, create the strongest behavioral loops. They know that a mind in deep focus is a mind that is not consuming, and consumption is the product. Your attention is being harvested, sold, traded, and you are being trained to believe that this is normal, that being constantly available is responsible, that responding immediately is polite, that FOMO, fear of missing out, is a legitimate emotion rather than a manufactured one.
But here is the truth that no app will ever notify you about. Every time you allow an interruption, you are not just losing the 30 seconds it takes to check the message. You are losing the 23 minutes it takes your brain to return to deep focus. Multiply that by 100 interruptions a day, and you begin to understand why you feel busy without feeling productive, why you feel tired without feeling accomplished, why you feel informed without feeling wise. There is a woman in India who understood concentration at a level that most of us cannot imagine. Her name was Mother Teresa. She arrived in Calcutta with nothing, no money, no organization, no political connections, just one purpose: to care for the dying. The people that everyone else stepped over. The ones that society had decided were not worth saving. She didn't start a foundation. She didn't write a business plan. She didn't diversify into education or housing or any of the 1,000 worthy causes she could sell. She picked up one dying person, and then another, and another. For 50 years, by the time the world noticed her, she had built a network of more than 200 missions across the globe. She had won the Nobel Peace Prize. She had become one of the most recognized figures in human history, and she had done it by never once dividing her attention from the single purpose that brought her to that first dying person. Controlled attention is not what you think it is.
It is not forcing yourself to concentrate. It is not using willpower to resist distraction. It is not downloading focus apps or buying noise-canceling headphones. Those are tools, and tools are useless without understanding. Controlled attention is the coordination of every faculty of your mind toward one definite end. It is not the suppression of distraction. It is the saturation of your consciousness with something so compelling that distraction loses its power. Think about the last time you were truly absorbed. Maybe it was a conversation that lasted hours but felt like minutes. Maybe it was work that you couldn't stop doing even when you were exhausted. Maybe it was a person who held your attention so completely that the rest of the world disappeared. That is not discipline. That is desire. Directed. Focused. Undivided. Thomas Edison understood this better than anyone. He once wrote that the most important factor in invention was not genius. It was not education. It was not resources. It was definiteness of purpose combined with persistent, concentrated attention. He said that in all his experience, he never found the solution to any important problem on his first attempt, or his 10th, or his 100th. But he also said something that should change how you see every obstacle in your life. When he finally discovered what he was searching for, he generally found that it had been within his reach all along. The solution was never missing. His attention was, and the only thing that revealed the solution was the refusal to look away. There is a law in psychology that operates whether you know about it or not. It is called the law of harmonious attraction. It states that forces and things suited to each other's needs have a natural tendency to come together. When you concentrate your attention on a definite purpose, you begin to condition your mind to attract only what serves that purpose. You stop noticing distractions because they are no longer relevant to the pattern you are building. You stop fearing obstacles because your attention is too occupied with navigation to waste energy on anxiety. You stop envying others because your path has become too specific to compare. This is not mysticism. This is the mechanics of attention. When your mind is saturated with one purpose, it filters reality through that purpose. And reality, which contains infinite possibilities, begins to reveal the ones that match your focus. The person who wants everything sees nothing clearly. The person who wants one thing sees everything that leads to it. I want you to imagine something. You are in a dark room, holding a flashlight. The beam is narrow. It illuminates only a small circle of floor. If you keep moving the flashlight, sweeping it across the room, you see everything briefly, and nothing clearly. But if you hold the beam steady, if you let your eyes adjust, if you refuse the temptation to search elsewhere, details emerge.
Textures become visible, and eventually, you see things that were invisible to the sweeping gaze. Your attention is that flashlight, and most people have been trained to sweep. There is a practice that can change everything. Not a hack, not a trick, a practice. Every morning, before the world demands your attention, decide what deserves it. Not what is urgent, not what is loud, not what is expected. What is essential to the one thing you are building? And then, protect that decision with the same intensity you would protect a child from danger. Turn off the notifications. Close the tabs. Tell people no. Accept that you will miss things, that some opportunities will pass, that some relationships will require patience. Because the alternative is not having more. It is having nothing that matters. In the next chapter, we confront something that most successful people never admit. They didn't do it alone. And the ones who tried, failed. But teamwork is not what you think it is. It is not collaboration. It is not friendship. It is something far more precise. Something that requires you to understand the psychology of making other people want your success as much as you do. And that skill, more than any other, separates the remembered from the forgotten. End of Chapter 2. Chapter: The Lonely Genius Myth. There is a story we love to tell ourselves. It goes like this. One person, one vision, one relentless will against the world, and against all odds, they win.
We call it the self-made story. We put it in movies. We sell it in biographies. We worship it in entrepreneurship culture, and it is almost entirely a lie. In 1908, a young journalist named Napoleon Hill walked into a mansion on Fifth Avenue. 64 rooms. One of the wealthiest men in the world. Andrew Carnegie. Hill had prepared questions. He had prepared introductions. He had prepared to impress. But Carnegie did something unexpected. He didn't talk about steel. He didn't talk about money. He talked about something that sounded almost naive. He talked about the mastermind principle. The idea that no single mind is complete. That every great achievement is actually the product of multiple minds working in harmony, toward a single purpose. And then Carnegie gave Hill a commission that would consume the next 20 years of his life. Interview 500 successful people. Find the patterns. Prove that the lone genius is a myth. Hill did it. He talked to Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Theodore Roosevelt, Wilbur Wright. And do you know what he found? Not one of them did it alone. Not one. But here is what makes this chapter uncomfortable. Teamwork is not what you think it is. It is not having friends who support you. It is not collaborating with people who agree with you. It is not surrounding yourself with people who make you feel good. Real teamwork is the coordination of effort toward a specific objective. And the word that matters most in that sentence is not teamwork. It is coordination. Because most groups of people are not coordinated. They are collections of individuals who happen to be in the same room. They share a building, they share a Slack channel, they share a mission statement on a wall, but they do not share a purpose. Not really. And without that shared purpose, you do not have teamwork. You have coexistence. Let me take you inside a room in 1932. National Cash Register, NCR. The company was dying, not because of the Great Depression, not because of competition, because of something far more deadly. The sales force had given up. Rumors were spreading that the company was bankrupt, that layoffs were coming, that the whole thing was finished. And the salesmen, instead of selling, were sitting in diners telling each other horror stories, confirming each other's fears, building a shared reality of collapse. The sales manager, Hugh Chalmers, called them all together. He could have threatened them. He could have offered bonuses. He could have fired the worst ones as an example. Instead, he did something that made no sense. He called for a shoeshine boy, an 11-year-old kid who worked in the factory. Chalmers paid him a dime, and then he asked him to give a speech. The boy was terrified. He had never spoken in front of adults. He had certainly never spoken to a room full of defeated salesmen. But Chalmers asked him simple questions. How old are you? 11.
How long have you been shining shoes? 6 months. How much do you make? A nickel per shine. Sometimes a tip. Who had your job before you? A boy named Ted. How old was Ted? 17. Why did he leave? He said he couldn't make a living. Chalmers turned to the room. Same job. Same customers. Same price. One boy quit because he couldn't make a living. The other boy is supporting his mother, saving money, and buying a bicycle. The only difference is the mental attitude. One salesman stood up, then another. Then the room erupted, not with anger, with recognition. They had been buying each other's hard luck stories, selling their own fears back and forth, creating a collective depression that had nothing to do with reality. And in that moment, they saw it. They saw that their defeat was not external. It was internal. It was shared. And if it was shared, it could be unshared. That year, NCR had one of its most profitable years in history. Not because the economy improved, not because the product changed, because a group of people who had been coordinated in their despair became coordinated in their determination. This is the psychology of teamwork. It is not about liking each other. It is not about being nice. It is about creating a shared mental state so powerful that individual limitations dissolve. But here is what almost no one understands. You cannot create this state by asking for it. You cannot create it with motivational posters. You cannot create it with trust falls or team-building exercises or Friday pizza parties. You create it by giving people something they actually want to coordinate around. Not what you want, what they want, and then showing them that your success is the path to their success. Peter Drucker, the management philosopher, once said something that should be carved into every boardroom table. All employees must see themselves as executives, not in title, not in salary, in psychology. They must see their work in the context of the whole operation. They must understand how their specific contribution moves the entire machine. Because the moment someone feels like a cog, they start acting like one. They do the minimum. They watch the clock. They save their energy for something that matters to them. And you cannot blame them. You have made them small, and small people do small things. General Douglas MacArthur understood this. Every staff meeting he ever led began the same way. He called on the most junior officer present, and no one was allowed to interrupt. Think about that. The most powerful military commander in the Pacific, surrounded by generals and admirals with decades of experience. And he started every meeting by listening to the person with the least power. Why? Because he knew that confidence is not built by praise from above. It is built by being heard when you expect to be ignored. And a confident team is a coordinated team, a team that will take risks. That will innovate. That will fight for something larger than their own survival. There is a company in Baltimore that proved this principle decades before Silicon Valley. Discovered culture, McCormick Spice. When Charles McCormick took over from his uncle, he did something radical. He created a junior board of directors. 17 young employees. No formal authority, but real responsibility. They were charged with examining everything the company did and presenting recommendations to the actual board, with one condition. They had to be unanimous. Think about what that requires. 17 people with different backgrounds, different ambitions, different perspectives, had to agree completely before they could speak. They had to listen to each other. They had to understand each other. They had to find solutions that worked for everyone. And in doing so, they created something that no individual genius could have created. A collective intelligence. A team mind. The results were immediate. Ideas flooded in. People who had been glorified clerks became strategic thinkers. The factory floor formed its own board. And the three boards met weekly in what they called a spirit of harmony. Not agreement. Harmony. The difference is everything. Agreement means everyone thinks the same. Harmony means different notes, creating something unified. McCormick even changed how people were fired.
It required 4 signatures from superiors who all believed it was necessary.
And the person being dismissed was allowed to plead their case. The company charged itself with an error if it let someone go before they understood why. This is not softness. This is the recognition that teamwork is fragile, that trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild, and that the person you fire today might have been the mind that saved you tomorrow. I need to tell you something that will make you uncomfortable. You are not a self-made person. Neither am I. Every word you know was taught to you by someone. Every skill you have was modeled by someone. Every opportunity you seized was made possible by someone's invisible labor. The food you eat, the roads you drive, the internet you use to listen to this, all of it is the product of millions of minds working in coordination. And yet we celebrate the individual. We put one person on magazine covers. We tell stories of lone wolves who conquered empires. We forget the armies that actually built those empires. This is not just historically inaccurate. It is psychologically dangerous. Because the person who believes they did it alone eventually believes they don't need anyone. And the person who doesn't need anyone is the person who no one needs. Let me tell you about the dark side of this myth. There are people who have genuinely brilliant minds, genuinely original ideas, genuinely superior skills, and they fail. Not because their ideas were wrong, not because their skills were insufficient. Because they could not make anyone else care. They treated teamwork as beneath them. They saw coordination as bureaucracy. They saw other people's contributions as interference. And so they worked alone. Or worse, they worked with people who resented them, who sabotaged them, who waited for them to fail. The lonely genius is not a hero. The lonely genius is a tragedy. So how do you actually inspire teamwork? Not the fake kind. Not the motivational poster kind. The real kind. First, you must have a definite purpose. Not a vague mission. Not a noble intention. A specific, concrete, measurable objective that everyone can understand. People cannot coordinate around ambiguity. They can only coordinate around clarity. Second, you must make the purpose matter to them personally. Not to the company. Not to the mission. To them. What does this objective give them? Recognition? Growth? Security? Meaning? If you cannot answer that question for every person on your team, you do not have a team. You have employees. And employees leave. Third, you must create an environment where honesty is safe, where disagreement is not punished, where the junior officer can speak first and be heard completely. This is harder than it sounds, because most leaders say they want honesty, but what they actually want is confirmation, and people know the difference. They always know. Fourth, you must be willing to share the rewards, not just money, credit, visibility, opportunity. The person who hogs the spotlight eventually stands in it alone, and alone is not a sustainable position. There is a final truth about teamwork that I want you to carry with you. Teamwork is not something you have, it is something you do. Every day, every interaction, every decision about who speaks first in a meeting, every choice about who gets credit for a success, every moment when you could listen but choose to speak instead. It is a practice, not a state, and like all practices, it either deepens or it decays. There is no standing still. Michelangelo did not paint the Sistine Chapel alone. He had assistants, craftsmen, patrons who believed in something they would never see completed. Every great achievement in human history was a team effort. Every single one. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop trying to be enough by yourself, and start building something that is enough for everyone. In the next chapter, we go somewhere most people don't want to go. We talk about defeat. Not the inspirational version. Not the failure is a stepping stone version. The real version. The kind that breaks people. The kind that makes you question everything. And the strange, almost unbearable truth that your worst moments might be carrying something you desperately need, if you can survive long enough to find it. End of Chapter 3. The beautiful destruction. Everyone. Not the small disappointments. Not the delayed flights or the rejected applications or the relationships that fade quietly. The real one. The moment when the ground you were standing on simply ceases to exist. Maybe it is a diagnosis. Maybe it is a betrayal. Maybe it is the sudden, absolute collapse of something you built your entire identity around. And in that moment, there is a voice. Not loud. Quiet. Almost gentle. It says, "This is the end." Most people believe that voice. They believe it because it feels true. Because the evidence is overwhelming. Because the pain is real and the future is invisible, and the past is suddenly useless. But here is what almost no one tells you. That voice is not a prophet. It is a salesman. And it is selling you the most expensive product in the world, your own surrender. In a small farmhouse in Wisconsin, a man named Milo Jones was living a life that looked like failure. Not dramatic failure. The quiet kind. The kind that grinds you down year after year until you stop expecting anything different. He farmed. He survived. He was barely getting by. And then, one ordinary morning, his body betrayed him. A stroke. Paralyzing. Complete. His family carried him to bed. They looked at him with the kind of pity that is actually grief. Grief for the life he would never have. The work he would never do. The man he would never be again. And they left him there. But Milo Jones did something that no one expected. He didn't accept the story they were telling about him.
He didn't accept the story he could have told about himself. Instead, he did the only thing he could do. He thought. Lying in that bed, unable to move, unable to work, unable to be the man he had been. He used the one resource that paralysis could not touch, his mind. He called his family together. He told them to plant the entire farm with corn, not for selling, for feeding pigs. The pigs would be slaughtered. The meat would become sausage, and that sausage would be sold across the country. His family thought he was delusional, a paralyzed farmer planning a meat empire from his bed. But they loved him, and they were desperate, so they did it. Within a few years, Jones Farm sausage was in stores nationwide. The family was wealthier than they had ever imagined, and Milo Jones, the man who had been left in bed as a hopeless invalid, had built something that outlived his paralysis. But here is what the story usually misses. It wasn't the money that saved him. It was the question he asked himself in that bed. What do I still have? Not, what have I lost? Not, why did this happen to me? Not, what did I do to deserve this? What do I still have? That question is the foundation of everything this chapter is about. Because adversity does not come to destroy you. It comes to reveal you. It strips away the costumes, the titles, the relationships that were conditional, the confidence that was borrowed. And underneath all of that, it shows you what is actually there.
Most people never see what is actually there. They rebuild the costumes before the inspection is complete. They find new titles, new relationships, new sources of borrowed confidence. And they go on, never knowing what they could have built from the real material underneath. Thomas Edison failed more than 10,000 times before he created a working light bulb. 10,000. Not 10. Not 100. 10,000 experiments that produced nothing useful. And when a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 10,000 times, he answered with something that sounds like optimism, but is actually something deeper. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That is not positive thinking. That is accurate thinking applied to adversity. Edison understood that each failure was information, data, a narrowing of possibility. Every wrong filament brought him closer to the right one. Every dead end was actually a signpost. But this requires something that most people cannot do. It requires looking at failure without the emotional story attached. There is a woman named Debbie Fields. In her 20s, she opened a cookie store, Mrs. Fields Cookies. She had a recipe people loved, a personality that drew customers, and a vision that seemed unstoppable. So she expanded. Fast. Too fast. Stores opened across the country. Costs spiraled, and the business that looked like a fairy tale became a nightmare of debt. She was drowning, not metaphorically, actually. Financially, emotionally. The thing she had built was crushing her, and in that crushing she found something. Not a solution, a question. What is this failure trying to teach me that I would never have learned from success? The answer changed everything. She had been trying to own and operate every store herself, control everything, be everywhere, and it was impossible. So she did something that felt like admitting defeat. She franchised. She let go. She allowed other people to carry her brand, her recipe, her vision. And in that letting go, she found the thing that had been blocking her all along, her own need for control. Mrs. Fields' Cookies became profitable again. It grew larger than it had ever been, and Debbie Fields became something more valuable than a successful business owner. She became someone who understood that her greatest failure had been her greatest teacher. Here is a truth that will not comfort you, but it will free you. Your adversity is not unfair. It is not random. It is not a mistake. It is feedback. Painful, precise, unwanted. But feedback, and like all feedback, it only becomes useful when you stop arguing with it and start listening to it. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote something that most people read too quickly. Our strength grows out of our weakness. He didn't say that weakness is secretly strength. He didn't say that suffering is good for you.
He said that strength grows out of weakness, which means the weakness must come first. The breaking must happen. The ground must disappear beneath your feet. And only then, in that terrifying absence of support, do you discover what you are actually capable of building. Not what you inherited. Not what you were trained to do. What you are capable of building from nothing. There is a list of reasons why people fail. It is uncomfortable to read, because you will see yourself in it, drifting through life without a definite purpose, meddling in other people's affairs because your own life feels empty, making the same mistakes again and again, expecting something for nothing, fearing poverty more than you desire wealth, letting negative emotions make your decisions, being too cautious or not cautious enough, choosing the wrong partner, choosing the wrong work, wasting time and money without intention. The list goes on. 25 items, maybe more, and most people have more than one. But here is what the list is actually for. Not for shame, not for self-punishment, for inventory. Napoleon Hill himself failed catastrophically. He started a magazine in Chicago. He worked endless hours. He believed in it completely. And then his business partner, his printer, sold the magazine out from under him. Hill lost everything. His work, his income, his reputation in that city. He could have returned to the safe legal career his wife's family wanted for him. He could have accepted defeat as final. He could have told himself that the world was unfair and settled into resentment. Instead, he asked himself the hard questions. Why had his partner betrayed him? What had he missed? What had his own behavior contributed? And the answers were not comfortable. He had been argumentative with his partner. He had let his ego dominate small decisions. He had been careless in business arrangements. He had trusted where he should have verified. But in seeing these truths, he found the seed of something. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, he moved to New York. He started a new magazine. This time, he controlled it completely. This time, he inspired cooperation rather than demanding it. This time, he was cautious where he had been careless. Within a year, the new magazine had twice the circulation of the old one, and from that foundation, he created the first correspondence courses on the science of personal achievement, the foundation of everything he would later become famous for. His defeat had not just taught him lessons, it had redirected his entire life toward something he might never have discovered without it. There is a poem by Walter Malone that captures something essential about this principle. It is called Opportunity. They do me wrong who say I come no more, when once I knock and fail to find you in. For every day I stand outside your door, and bid you wake and rise, to fight and win. Wail not for precious chances passed away. Weep not for golden ages on the wane. Each night I burn the records of the day. At sunrise every soul is born again. The poem is speaking as opportunity itself, and it is saying something that contradicts everything our fear tells us. There is not one chance. There are infinite chances. Every sunrise is a new beginning. Every defeat is a burning of old records. Every failure is a birth, not a death, but only if you choose to see it that way. Shakespeare wrote the opposite vision in Julius Caesar. Brutus, the assassin, says, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood, leads on to fortune, omitted. All the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries." This is the voice of despair. The belief that there is one tide, one chance, one moment, and if you miss it, you are finished. Brutus believed this, and Brutus was wrong. Not just morally, psychologically. He was wrong about how opportunity works, and his wrong belief became a self-fulfilling prophecy. He missed the tide he imagined, and so he accepted defeat as final, and it became final. Here is the practice, not the theory, the actual practice for when adversity comes. First, feel it. Do not rush to positivity. Do not reframe too quickly. Do not spiritual bypass your way out of legitimate pain. Adversity hurts because it matters. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't hurt. So let it matter, for a while. Second, ask the inventory question. What is this trying to teach me that I would never have learned otherwise? Not, why is this happening to me? That question has no useful answer. Third, look for the seed, not the full flower, not the immediate benefit. The seed, the small, hidden thing that contains the potential for equivalent or greater good. It might be a skill you had to develop, a relationship you discovered, a truth about yourself you were avoiding, a direction you were too comfortable to consider. Fourth, act on it. Not when you feel ready, not when the pain is gone. Now, the bodybuilders have a principle that applies here perfectly. They call it resistance training. It is not enough to lift the weight. You must lower it slowly, with control, with resistance, because the muscle grows not in the lifting, but in the controlled return, in the resistance, in the struggle against gravity. Defeat is your resistance training. The return to where you started, done deliberately, with attention, with intention, builds something that success alone never could. I want to leave you with one final image. There is a tree that grows in tropical forests. It starts as a small plant on the forest floor, and it stays small, for years, decades, because the canopy above blocks all the light. And then, one day, a giant tree falls. The light pours in, and that small plant, which has been waiting in darkness, explodes into growth. It becomes one of the largest trees in the forest.
But it could not have become that tree without the darkness, without the waiting, without the fall of something that seemed permanent. Your adversity is the fallen tree. The light it creates is yours, but only if you stop mourning the shade and start growing toward the sun. In the next chapter, we explore something that sounds like fantasy, but is actually the most practical skill you can develop: creative vision. The ability to see what does not exist yet. Not imagination, not daydreaming, something else. Something that built every civilization, every invention, every love story that ever changed someone's life. And the strange thing is, you already have it. You just haven't been taught how to use it. End of chapter 4. Chapter: Seeing What Doesn't Exist Yet. There is a difference between imagining something and seeing it. Most people never learn this difference, and so they spend their lives imagining things they will never build. A child imagines being an astronaut. A teenager imagines being famous. An adult imagines being free. But imagination without vision is just entertainment. It is Netflix for your mind. It feels good. It changes nothing. Creative vision is something else entirely. And it is the difference between the people who change the world and the people who watch them do it.
In 1879, a man with almost no formal education was failing. Repeatedly, consistently, almost comically. Thomas Edison had spent 3 months in grade school. He had been fired from almost every job he held. He was losing his hearing, and he was trying to do something that every expert said was impossible. Create a light that would not burn out. Not a candle, not a gas lamp. A light that would last, that would transform human life from darkness into something we now take for granted. Edison failed more than 10,000 times. 10,000 experiments, 10,000 dead ends, 10,000 versions of, "This doesn't work." But here is what separated Edison from every other inventor who failed. He could see the light before it existed. Not imagine it. See it. He knew what it would look like. He knew how it would feel in a room at night. He knew the quality of the illumination, the warmth, the transformation of human experience. And because he could see it so clearly, each failure was not a rejection of his dream. It was data. A step. A narrowing of the distance between what he saw and what the world could yet see. There are 2 kinds of imagination. Most people only know the first. Synthetic imagination. It takes what already exists and rearranges it. It combines known ideas into new combinations. It is useful. It is common. And it has built most of the world around you. Edison used synthetic imagination when he realized that charcoal is made by controlling the amount of air that reaches burning wood. He applied that known fact to the known problem of a burning filament. He removed the air, he controlled the burn, and the light lasted 8.5 hours. But synthetic imagination alone would not have carried him through 10,000 failures, because synthetic imagination works with what is, and what is was not enough. The second kind is creative imagination. It does not rearrange what exists. It pulls from somewhere deeper, from the subconscious, from the place where ideas arrive rather than being constructed. Edison described this himself. He said that ideas came to him in flashes, not from logic, not from deduction, from a place he could not fully explain. And this is where creative vision becomes something almost mystical, because it requires you to trust something you cannot see, to act on something that does not yet exist, to build a bridge while standing on air. There was a man named F. W. Woolworth. He worked in a hardware store. No, was not remarkable. He was not ambitious in any visible way. He simply wanted to be a good employee. One day, his boss complained about old inventory, items that wouldn't sell, dead stock taking up space. Woolworth's imagination did something simple. He asked if he could set up a table, put everything on it, price it at 10 cents,
The stuff sold. Fast. Woolworth saw something his boss didn't. Not because he was smarter, because he was looking at the same situation with a different question. Not how do we get rid of this, but what if people actually want this at the right price? He went to his boss with an idea.
An entire store built on this concept, the five and dime. His boss said no. He couldn't see it. He didn't have creative vision. He had inventory problems. Woolworth found other investors, and the Woolworth chain spread across America. His former boss later estimated that every word he used to reject Woolworth's idea cost him about $1 million. Here is what creative vision is not. It is not daydreaming. It is not fantasy. It is not the mental movies you play when you're bored. Creative vision is imagination directed toward a definite purpose. It is seeing something so clearly that you can describe it to someone else. So clearly that you can plan around it. So clearly that you can persist through failure because the vision is more real to you than the turn obstacles. This is why most people cannot build what they imagine. Their imagination is entertainment. Their vision is non-existent. Think about your own life. What do you want? Not what do you wish for? Not what would be nice. What do you actually want? Now, can you see it? Not metaphorically, literally. Can you close your eyes and see the room you want to live in, the work you want to do, the person you want to become? If the answer is no, you do not have creative vision yet. You have desire. And desire without vision is just hunger without a meal. It hurts. It motivates. But it does not nourish. There was a scientist named Elmer Gates. He held more patents than Edison, twice as many, and his method was strange. He would enter a soundproof room, sit at a table, turn off the lights, and concentrate on a specific problem. Sometimes ideas came immediately. Sometimes he waited an hour in darkness. Sometimes nothing came at all. But when they came, they were not fragments. They were complete solutions. Ideas he had not been thinking about at all. Answers to questions he had asked days before. Gates understood something that the modern productivity culture has forgotten. Creative vision requires emptiness. Not stimulation. Not input. Not more information. Emptiness. We live in an age of infinite content. Every moment can be filled. Every silence can be interrupted. Every empty space can be colonized by a podcast or a notification or a scroll. And in that constant filling, we have lost the capacity for creative vision. Because vision does not arrive in noise. It arrives in silence. In the gaps between thoughts. In the darkness where the mind has nothing to do but listen. Gates sat in darkness. Not because he was mystical, because he was practical. He knew that the conscious mind is a terrible place for new ideas. It is a filing system. It organizes what already exists. New ideas come from elsewhere, and the only way to hear them is to stop the filing system from running. There is a man named Thomas Stemberg. He was successful in the grocery business. He had built megastores, huge selection, low prices. The model worked, but Stemberg was not satisfied. He looked at the grocery megastore and asked a question that no one else was asking. What if this concept works for something else? He looked for a big market that was still being served by small, outdated stores, and he found it. Office supplies. In 1986, he opened Staples, the first megastore for business supplies. The idea was so obvious in retrospect that competitors immediately copied it. Office Depot, Office Max. The entire industry transformed, but Stemberg saw it first, because he had trained his mind to look beyond what existed and ask what could exist. Creative vision is needed now more than ever, not for business ideas, for everything. We need new forms of energy, new ways of educating children who have stopped paying attention, new approaches to healthcare that don't bankrupt families, new models of work that don't destroy human connection. And none of these will come from people who are only rearranging what already exists. They will come from people who can see what does not exist yet, and then build it. Here is the practice, not the theory. The actual practice for developing creative vision. First, define your definite major purpose. Vision without direction is hallucination. You must know what you are trying to see. Second, create emptiness. Schedule time with nothing. No phone. No input. No agenda. Just you and a question. Third, trust what arrives. Not everything will be useful. But the act of dismissing ideas before they fully form teaches your mind to stop offering them. Fourth, write everything down. Vision that is not recorded evaporates. Your mind will convince you that you'll remember. You won't. Fifth, act on the vision. Not when it is perfect. Not when you have all the resources. Now.
Because creative vision without action is just a beautiful dream. And the world has enough dreamers. It needs builders. In the next chapter, we go somewhere deeply personal. We talk about the body that carries every vision, the mind-body that most people abandon in pursuit of success, and the strange, almost counterintuitive truth that your greatest achievements are physically impossible if you have physically destroyed yourself. This is not a chapter about gym memberships. It is a chapter about the architecture of sustainable power. End of Chapter 5. The body that carries the dream. There is a man who changed how the world runs. Not a politician, not a billionaire, a track coach. Bill Bowerman, University of Oregon. For decades, he trained athletes. He studied movement. He understood the relationship between the body and performance at a level that almost no one else did. And then, one morning, he had an idea. Not about training, about shoes. He poured rubber into his wife's waffle iron. He created a sole with grip and cushioning that didn't exist before. That shoe became Nike, the largest athletic footwear company in the world. But this chapter is not about shoes. It is about what Bowerman understood that most people never do. Your body is not a vehicle. It is not a machine that carries your mind from meeting to meeting. It is not an inconvenience that requires maintenance. Your body is the ground of everything you will ever achieve, and most people are building castles on sand. We have been taught to separate mind and body. Philosophers did this. Religions did this. Medicine did this. The mind thinks. The body acts. The mind is noble. The body is base. But this separation is a lie. A dangerous one. Because your mind and body are not two things. They are one thing. A mind-body. And what affects one affects the other in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Think about the last time you were truly afraid. Not worried, not anxious, truly afraid. Your heart rate increased, your breathing changed, blood left your digestive system and flooded your muscles. Your pupils dilated, your hearing sharpened. This is not metaphor. This is biology. Your mind perceived a threat, and your body transformed itself in seconds to survive. Now think about what happens when you live in a state of low-grade fear. All day, every day. The mortgage, the relationship, the job, the future. Your body cannot distinguish between a tiger and a text message. It responds to both with the same ancient machinery. And when that machinery is active constantly, it begins to break things. Your immune system, Your cardiovascular system, your digestive system, your sleep, your mind. There is a growing body of research that connects mental distress to physical disease, not as correlation, as causation. Allergies, asthma, skin conditions, hypertension, heart disease, arthritis, autoimmune disorders. These are not mysteries. They are the body speaking a language that most people refuse to learn. And the language is simple. You are living in a way that I cannot sustain. There was a man named Norman Cousins. He was diagnosed with a degenerative disease. The doctors gave him little hope, so he checked himself out of the hospital. He moved into a hotel room, and he watched comedy films. Not occasionally, constantly. Marx Brothers, Candid Camera, anything that made him laugh. He claimed that 10 minutes of genuine belly laughter gave him 2 hours of pain-free sleep. The medical establishment dismissed him, until they couldn't. Because he recovered, not completely, but significantly, enough to write about it, enough to change how some doctors thought about healing. This is not a chapter about laughter curing disease. It is a chapter about the mind-body connection, about the fact that your thoughts are not just thoughts. They are biochemical events. They are signals. They are instructions that your body follows whether you intend them to or not. When you think about illness, you are not just observing your health, you are participating in it. When you dwell on fear, you are not just feeling afraid, you are instructing your body to prepare for emergency. And a body in constant emergency eventually collapses. Nature moves in rhythms. This is not poetry, this is physics. The ocean has tides, the moon waxes and wanes, the seasons turn. Your heart beats, your lungs expand and contract, and yet we have built lives that ignore rhythm completely. We work until we collapse. We eat at screens. We sleep with alarms. We treat our bodies like machines that can be run continuously without maintenance. And then we are surprised when they break. The sandy beach moves with the waves and lasts for eons. The breakwater stands fixed against them and is eventually destroyed. You must learn to bend, to follow work with play. Mental effort with physical effort, seriousness with humor, eating with fasting.
There is a story about Archimedes that everyone knows. He was trying to solve a problem, how to determine the volume of an irregular object. He struggled. He failed. He exhausted himself. And then he decided to take a bath. As he lowered himself into the water, he watched the level rise. And he understood. The displacement of water would reveal the volume. He ran through the streets naked, shouting, "Eureka!" But the real lesson is not about bathtubs. It is about what happens when the conscious mind stops trying to solve the problem. Your subconscious does its best work when your conscious mind is at rest, not distracted.
Not scrolling, actually resting. We have forgotten how to rest, not sleep. Rest. True rest is not the absence of activity. It is the presence of something else. Presence. Attention to the moment. A mind that is not planning, reviewing, worrying, or rehearsing. When was the last time you experienced that? For most people, the answer is childhood. Before the world taught them that stillness is laziness, that relaxation is unproductive, that the body is an obstacle to achievement rather than its foundation. Let me be direct. Your body is the only thing you have that cannot be replaced. Not your job, not your relationship, not your reputation, not your bank account. All of those can be rebuilt. Your body, once destroyed, cannot be. And yet most people treat their bodies with less care than they treat their phones. They upgrade their devices annually. They neglect their bodies for decades. They eat food that is not food. They move less than prisoners in solitary confinement. They sleep less than their biology requires. And they wonder why they feel exhausted, anxious, and empty. There is a practice that sounds too simple to matter, but it does. Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. This was the formula of Émile Coué, a French psychologist who understood something that modern medicine is still catching up to. Your mind is not just observing your health, it is creating it. When you repeat a statement like this, you are not being naive. You are being strategic. You are filling your mental environment with the instruction of improvement, and your body, which receives every instruction your mind sends, begins to follow. But this is not just about positive thinking. It is about the architecture of a life that supports the mind-body. Food is information, not fuel, not pleasure, information. Every bite you take sends signals to your cells, to your gut microbiome, to your brain, to your hormones. Processed food sends one signal. Whole food sends another. Sugar sends a signal of emergency. Fiber sends a signal of abundance. And your body responds to each signal with a different biochemistry, a different state, a different capacity for thought, emotion, and action. Exercise is not about appearance. It is about brain function. When you move your body, you increase blood flow to your brain. You stimulate the production of neurotransmitters. You reduce inflammation. You improve sleep. You regulate stress hormones. The person who does not exercise is not just physically weaker, they are mentally weaker, not in willpower, in capacity. Their brain literally functions less well. They think more slowly. They regulate emotion less effectively. They are more susceptible to anxiety and depression. This is not a moral judgment. It is biology. Sleep is not a luxury. It is maintenance. During sleep, your brain cleans itself. Literally. The glymphatic system flushes toxins that accumulate during waking hours. Memories are consolidated. Emotions are processed. The entire system resets. When you cut sleep, you are not gaining time. You are accumulating debt, cognitive debt, emotional debt, physical debt, and debts compound. They do not disappear. They accumulate until the system fails. There is a final truth about health that almost no one wants to hear. Your body knows the truth about your life. Even when your mind is lying to you, you can tell yourself that you are fine, that the stress is temporary, that you'll rest when the project is done, that you'll take care of yourself when you have more time. But your body keeps the score. Every skipped meal, every night of insufficient sleep, every day without movement, every moment of unprocessed stress, it remembers, it accumulates, and eventually, it speaks. So here's the practice, not the theory, the actual practice. Eat food that your grandmother would recognize as food. Move your body every day, not for an hour, for 20 minutes, but every day. Sleep enough that you wake without an alarm. If that is impossible, sleep as much as you can. Protect your sleep like you protect your most important meetings. Rest deliberately, not by collapsing, not by scrolling, by doing something that absorbs you without demanding anything. And most importantly, listen to your body. It is speaking to you. In fatigue, in tension, in pain, in mood.
These are not inconveniences. They are messages.
And the person who ignores messages eventually receives a warning they cannot ignore. In the next chapter, we talk about the two resources that everyone claims to value, and almost no one actually protects: time and money. But not in the way you've heard before. We are going to explore something uncomfortable: the possibility that you are bleeding both, every day, in ways you have never examined. And the cost is not just financial. It is the cost of the life you could have lived. End of Chapter 6. Chapter: The Currency of Life. There is a man sitting in a prison cell in Ohio. He has been convicted of embezzlement. His reputation is destroyed. His future is non-existent. And he has nothing but time. Most people in his position would count the days until release, or plan revenge, or sink into despair. William Sidney Porter did something else. He wrote short stories, dozens of them, hundreds of them. He wrote about ordinary people, about surprise endings, about the human condition with a warmth and wit that no one expected from a convicted criminal. By the time he was released, he was the most popular short story writer in America. You know him as O. Henry. But this is not a story about prison literature. It is a story about what happens when someone stops treating time as something that happens to them, and starts treating it as something they spend. There is another man, an Air Force officer, constantly traveling, constantly renting cars, constantly frustrated. Warren Avis kept asking the same question. Why can't I pick up a car at the airport? It seems obvious now. But in the 1940s, it didn't exist. You took a taxi from the airport. You rented a car downtown. The airport was for planes, not for cars. Avis had $10,000 in savings, not enough to build a nationwide operation, but enough to prove the concept. He wrote a business plan. He got a bank loan. He opened counters at airports. Within 8 years, he sold the company for almost $8 million, an 800% return. But the real investment was not money. It was time. Time and money are the same thing. This is not a metaphor. This is accounting. You trade time for money. You trade money for time. Every purchase is a claim on hours of your life. Every hour you waste is money you will never recover. And yet most people treat these two resources with opposite attitudes. They guard their money carefully, and they waste their time casually. They comparison shop for hours to save $5, and then spend 3 hours scrolling through content that adds nothing to their lives. The math doesn't work, but no one is doing the math. Let me ask you something. How did you spend the last 24 hours? Not approximately, exactly. 8 hours sleeping, maybe. 8 hours working, maybe. 8 hours of what you call spare time. Now, what did you do with those 8 hours? Television? Social media? Commuting? Chores? Waiting? Be honest. How many of those 8 hours moved you toward anything you actually want? For most people, the answer is close to zero, and that is not a judgment. It is an observation. There are two kinds of people in the world: doers and drifters. Doers have a definite purpose. They manage circumstances. They examine ideas before adopting them. They take risks. They learn from mistakes. They go the extra mile. They control their habits. They maintain positive mental attitudes. They create mastermind alliances. They recognize their weaknesses and correct them. Drifters have no goal. They are controlled by circumstances. They flit from one idea to the next. They blame others. They repeat mistakes. They do only what is required. They let habits control them. They have negative mental attitudes. They never improve their situation. The difference between these two types is not intelligence, not talent, not opportunity. It is how they spend their time. A doer does not evaluate work by hours. They evaluate it by useful service rendered. They do not complain about long hours. They complain that the hours are not long enough. Not because they are workaholics, because they are doing something that matters to them. This is the secret that the anti-hustle culture misses. It is not about working more. It is about working on what matters. The person who spends 4 hours on something meaningful is richer than the person who spends 12 hours on something meaningless. Even if the meaningless thing pays more, because time is the only resource that cannot be replenished, and the doer knows this. There is a technique for managing time that sounds too simple to work, but it does. Take a sheet of paper, divide it into 4 quadrants. Top left, important and urgent. These are crises, deadlines, emergencies, the things that demand your attention now. Top right, important but not urgent. These are the things that determine your future. Planning, relationship building, skill development,
Health maintenance. This is where doers spend most of their time, and this is why they have fewer crises. Bottom left. Unimportant but urgent. These are interruptions, other people's emergencies, notifications, meetings that could have been emails. Drifters live here, reacting to everything, accomplishing nothing. Bottom right. Unimportant and not urgent. These are the time killers. Mindless scrolling, gossip, television you don't even enjoy. Everyone needs some of this. But most people live here, and then wonder why their lives feel empty. Let me tell you about paper. Yes, paper. Two kinds cross your desk. Valuable and superfluous. The superfluous stuff should be thrown away without being set down. Never given a second thought. Never allowed to occupy mental space. The valuable stuff should be handled as little as possible. If you can act on it immediately, do. If you must delay, mark it. A small dot in the corner.
The next time you pick it up, another dot. Soon you will see how many times you touch the same piece of paper without doing anything, and you will be motivated to change. This is not about paper. It is about attention. Every object you handle without purpose is a theft from your life. Now, money. Most people have never budgeted. Not really. They have a rough idea of what comes in, and they spend until it is gone. This is not budgeting. This is hoping. Real budgeting starts with a principle that sounds selfish. Pay yourself first. Before bills. Before entertainment. Before anything. Set aside a fixed percentage of your income. 10%. Minimum. This is not savings for a vacation. This is the foundation of your future. The weapon against the fear of poverty. The resource that allows you to take risks. To start businesses. To survive emergencies. To have options. There is a reason that most lottery winners end up bankrupt. They did not earn the money. They did not learn the lessons that earning requires. Money that comes without effort usually leaves without meaning, because the value is not in the amount. It is in the transformation that earning it creates in you. The discipline, the skills, the relationships, the self-knowledge. These are the real products of work. Money is just the receipt. If you are in debt, you must pay it off. Aggressively. But not at the expense of your savings habit. This sounds impossible. It is not. It is uncomfortable. Cut everything that is not essential, not permanently, until the debt is gone. And when the debt is gone, divide what you were paying between savings and increased quality of life. Never increase your spending to match your income. Increase your savings. Increase your investments. Increase your options. Here is the practice, not the theory, the actual practice. Every morning, decide how you will spend your time, not what you hope to do, what you will actually do. Every payday, decide how you will spend your money, before anything else takes it. Track both, not approximately, exactly. Review weekly, adjust monthly, and every quarter, ask yourself the hard question. Is how I am spending my time and money creating the life I want? If the answer is no, something must change. Not someday, now. In the final chapter, we go to the deepest principle of all, the invisible force that shapes everything, the law that makes your habits inevitable, the power that is working on you right now, whether you know it or not, whether you want it or not, and the terrifying, liberating truth that you can choose what it shapes you into, but only if you understand how it works. End of Chapter 7. Chapter, The Invisible Force That Shapes Everything. Not at your ceiling, not at your phone, at the sky. The stars you see tonight are in precisely predictable positions. They have been there for billions of years. They will be there for billions more. The planets move in orbits so precise that we can predict eclipses centuries in advance. The tides follow the moon with mathematical certainty. The seasons turn with a reliability that made agriculture possible. This is not coincidence. This is order. There is a law that governs everything. Not a suggestion. Not a principle that works if you believe in it. A law. It governs the movement of galaxies, the growth of plants, the behavior of atoms, and the patterns of your own mind. It is called cosmic habit force, and it is the most important thing you have never heard of. Here is what cosmic habit force means. Everything in the universe is subject to the influence of its environment. Everything. A sunflower does not grow from a turnip seed. A giraffe does not give birth to a tadpole. Clouds do not release milk. Everything does what its nature compels it to do, and that nature is shaped by the forces that surround it. Gravity, electromagnetism, chemical attraction, and for living things, something else. Habit. You are where you are because of your habits, not because of your intentions.
Not because of your desires, not because of your potential, your habits, the thoughts you repeat, the actions you perform automatically, the reactions you have before you think, the patterns that run your life while you are busy planning something else. Cosmic habit force does not care about your plans. It cares about your patterns. Think about a river.
Water follows the path of least resistance. At first, the path is random. Water finds cracks. It explores, it tries different routes. But once a channel is established, the water returns to it. Again, and again, and again. Eventually, the channel becomes a riverbed, and the river cannot choose to flow elsewhere. It is bound by the shape it has created. Your mind is that river. Your thoughts are the water. Your habits are the riverbed. And cosmic habit force is the law that makes the riverbed permanent. This is terrifying, and it is liberating. Terrifying because if your habits are negative, cosmic habit force will make them permanent. It will turn your occasional pessimism into chronic depression, your occasional procrastination into permanent paralysis, your occasional envy into consuming bitterness. Liberating, because if your habits are positive, cosmic habit force will make them permanent too. It will turn your occasional discipline into unshakable willpower, your occasional generosity into defining character, your occasional focus into relentless concentration. The law does not judge, it only enforces, and you are the one who chooses what it enforces. There was a company called American Express. In the 1980s, it was the most prestigious charge card in the world, the black card, the symbol of success, the status object that opened doors. They had built habits that worked. High fees, exclusive membership, premium service. Merchants paid more to accept Amex because card members spent more. And then the world changed. The economy tightened. Consumers became price conscious. Merchants became margin conscious. But American Express did not change. Its habits had become its identity. It could not imagine being anything other than premium. Cardholders switched to no-fee Visas and MasterCards. Merchants organized boycotts. Profits disappeared. Losses mounted. Cosmic habit force had made their success habits permanent, and those same habits were now destroying them. This is the danger that almost no one sees. The habit that saves you can become the habit that kills you, because cosmic habit force does not distinguish between good habits and bad habits. It makes all habits permanent. The entrepreneur who built a company through sheer willpower may destroy it by refusing to skelegate. The athlete who succeeded through intensity may burn out by refusing to rest. The parent who protected their child may cripple them by refusing to let go. Every strength contains its own weakness, and cosmic habit force will amplify both. So how do you use this law instead of being used by it? First, you must become aware of your habits, not your intentions, not your self-image, your actual habits. What do you do when you first wake up? Not what do you plan to do. What do you actually do? What do you do when you feel stressed? When you feel bored? When you feel lonely? When you feel successful? These are not random behaviors. They are patterns, and patterns become permanent. Second, you must understand the three essentials of habit formation. Plasticity, the capacity to change. You are not fixed. Your brain can rewire itself. New pathways can be formed. Old pathways can weaken. But plasticity requires effort. Conscious, deliberate, repeated effort. The clay must be worked. The new shape must be held until it sets. Frequency of impression. How often you repeat the new pattern. Once is not enough. 10 times is not enough. Research suggests 66 days for a habit to become automatic. Some take longer. Some take much longer. Intensity of impression. How deeply you feel the new pattern. Going through the motions is not enough. You must concentrate. You must feel the importance of what you are doing. You must connect the new habit to something that matters deeply. Plasticity, frequency, intensity. These are the three levers, and you control all of them. There is a woman who worked the night shift at an electronics plant. She was allowed 2 10-minute breaks. Most of her coworkers smoked. She didn't want to start, so she decided to eat instead. A carrot from her garden, an apple, something healthy, every day, at the same times, 6 p.m., 10:30 p.m. At first, it was a choice, a deliberate substitution, but after months, something changed. She began to feel hungry before the breaks. Her body anticipated the pattern. Her mind expected the reward. Cosmic habit force had taken over. The habit was no longer a choice. It was automatic. But here is where the story turns. When her garden stopped producing, she switched to vending machine snacks. Candy bars, cookies, chips. The habit was still there. The frequency was still there. The intensity was still there. But the content had changed. She began gaining weight. She felt distracted before breaks. The habit that had served her was now harming her, and she realized something crucial. Cosmic habit force does not care about the quality of the habit. It only cares about the consistency. So she made a new choice. She brought books to work. She read during breaks. At first, the hunger for food persisted, but the hunger for knowledge was stronger. Within weeks, she had replaced one automatic pattern with another. Cosmic habit force had been redirected. This is the core truth. You are being shaped, right now, by forces you may not see. Your environment, your repeated thoughts, your automatic actions, your emotional reactions. And cosmic habit force is making these patterns permanent. The only question is whether you are participating in the shaping, or whether you are being shaped without your knowledge. Here is the practice, not the theory, the actual practice. First, take inventory. Write down your daily habits, morning to night, every automatic behavior, every repeated thought, every emotional pattern. Be honest, not judgmental, honest. Second, identify the habits that serve your definite purpose, and the habits that undermine it. You will find both. Everyone has both. Third, choose one habit to change, not 10. One, the most destructive, or the most foundational. Fourth, define the replacement. What will you do instead? When? How? Be specific. Vague intentions fail. Specific plans succeed. Fifth, commit to 66 days. Minimum. Track every day. No exceptions. No negotiations. Sixth, create environmental support. Surround yourself with cues that reinforce the new habit. Remove cues that trigger the old one. Your environment shapes your habits. Shape your environment first. There is a final truth about cosmic habit force that changes everything. It works on your thoughts too. Every thought you repeat becomes more likely to be repeated. Every belief you rehearse becomes more deeply embedded. Every fear you entertain becomes more automatic. And every hope you hold becomes more powerful. Every faith you practice becomes more certain. Every purpose you affirm becomes more defining. Cosmic habit force does not distinguish between fear and faith. It only makes permanent what you practice. So the question is not whether cosmic habit force will shape you. It will. The question is what you will give it to work with. Will you fill your mind with thoughts of poverty or thoughts of abundance? Will you practice fear or faith? Will you rehearse your limitations or your possibilities? Every thought is a seed. Every repetition is water, and cosmic habit force is the sun that makes it grow. There is an old saying, sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. You are sowing something right now, with every choice, every thought, every moment. Cosmic habit force is watching, not with judgment, with absolute mathematical inevitable response. It will give you exactly what you plant, nothing more, nothing less. So plant carefully, water consistently, and trust the law that has governed the stars since the beginning of time. End of Chapter 8. The Discipline You Can't. There is a man in Chicago who wakes up every morning at 4:30 a.m., not because he has to, not because someone is watching, but because, 20 years ago, he made a decision that he would no longer be controlled by the weakest version of himself. His friends think he's crazy. His family worries he's missing out on life. But here's what they don't see. While they are still hitting snooze, arguing with their alarm clocks, bargaining for 5 more minutes of unconsciousness, he has already won the first battle of the day. And that battle? It's not against the world. It's not against his competitors. It's against the part of his mind that whispers, you don't have to do this. You can start tomorrow. You deserve a break. That whisper is the most dangerous voice you will ever hear, because it sounds like comfort. It feels like self-care. But it is actually the voice of a prison you are building around yourself, one excuse at a time. Let me tell you about the architecture of self-discipline. Not the Instagram version, not the motivational poster version, but the real, ugly, uncomfortable truth about what it means to master yourself. Think about the last time you said you were going to do something and didn't do it. Maybe it was a diet. Maybe it was a morning routine. Maybe it was reaching out to someone you needed to apologize to. What happened in that moment when you broke your word to yourself? Most people think nothing happened. They think, I'll start again Monday. But something did happen. You just taught your subconscious that your word means nothing.
You just proved to the most important person in your life, you, that you cannot be trusted. And here's the terrifying part. Your subconscious is keeping score. Every broken promise, every abandoned goal, every "I'll do it tomorrow" that turned into never. Now, I want you to imagine a different kind of person. Someone who says they will do something and does it. Not because they feel like it, not because it's easy, but because they made a decision, and their decisions are not suggestions. They are contracts. This is the person who goes to the gym when it's raining, who writes the email when they're tired, who has the difficult conversation when they'd rather hide, who saves the money when they'd rather spend it.
Who says no to the distraction when everyone else is saying yes? What does this person have that you don't? It's not willpower. Willpower is a myth. It's a finite resource that runs out by 3 p.m. for most people. What they have is something far more powerful. They have built a system of self-discipline so robust that they no longer need willpower. They have automated their excellence. They have made the hard choices so routine that they feel easier than the easy choices. Let me explain how this works in the real world. You know that feeling when you're scrolling through your phone at midnight, telling yourself just 5 more minutes, and suddenly it's 2 a.m.? That is not a lack of willpower. That is a lack of architecture. Your environment is designed to capture your attention. The apps on your phone are engineered by some of the smartest people in the world to make you lose track of time. They are not your friends. They are not neutral tools. They are weapons pointed directly at your ability to focus, to rest, to think deeply. And you are handing them the ammunition. Self-discipline is not about being a robot. It's not about eliminating pleasure. It's about choosing your pleasures consciously instead of letting them choose you, unconsciously. The man who wakes up at 4:30 a.m., he doesn't hate sleep. He loves the feeling of having conquered himself before the sun rises. He loves the silence of the early morning when the world hasn't started demanding things from him yet. He loves the person he becomes when he keeps his promises to himself. That love is what makes the discipline sustainable. Not punishment, not guilt, but a deep, almost romantic relationship with the version of himself that does what he says he will do. Now, let's talk about the emotions, because this is where most people fail. You have been taught that your emotions are authentic, that you should honor your feelings, that if you don't feel like doing something, you shouldn't force yourself. But here's a question that will change everything. When did you decide that your feelings were the best advisor for your life? Your feelings are data. They are not directives. They are information about your current state, not instructions about what to do next. The person who waits to feel motivated before taking action will spend their entire life waiting. Motivation is a lagging indicator, not a leading one. You don't feel motivated and then act. You act, and then motivation catches up to you like a loyal dog following its owner. I want you to think about the 7 negative emotions that silently govern most people's lives. Fear, hatred, anger, greed, jealousy, revenge, superstition. Each one of these is a prison warden. Each one will lock you in a cell of your own making if you let it. Fear tells you to stay small. Hatred tells you to stay wounded. Anger tells you to stay reactive. Greed tells you that you never have enough. Jealousy tells you that someone else's success is your failure. Revenge tells you to destroy what you could have built. Superstition tells you that you are powerless against invisible forces. But there are 7 positive emotions too. Love, sexual energy directed toward creation. Hope, faith, sympathy, optimism, loyalty. These are not just feel-good words. They are the operating system of a mind that has chosen to discipline itself toward growth instead of decay. Let me tell you about the structure of a disciplined mind. There is the ego, not the arrogant ego that the internet loves to criticize, but the seat of your willpower, the part of you that can override every other impulse and say, "We are doing this." Period. There are your emotions, the fuel that drives action. Without emotional energy, nothing moves. But uncontrolled emotion is like gasoline spilled on the floor. It will burn down everything you love. There is your reason, the judge that weighs options and calculates consequences. Reason without emotion is a cold machine. Emotion without reason is a wildfire. You need both, balanced, working together. There is your imagination, where new possibilities are born. But imagination without discipline is just daydreaming. It needs the structure of a plan to become reality. There is your conscience, the moral compass that tells you whether you're roused, moving toward integrity or away from it. Ignore it long enough, and it stops speaking. Listen to it, and it grows louder and clearer. And there is your memory,
the archive of everything you've experienced. A disciplined mind doesn't let the past dictate the future. It learns from the past, then closes the door on it and moves forward. Now, here's a truth that will make some people uncomfortable. You cannot discipline what you cannot control. And there are 4 things in your mental universe that you do not control. Infinite intelligence, the creative force of the universe. You don't command it. You align with it. You open yourself to it through faith and action, your subconscious mind. You cannot directly control it, but you can feed it. You can train it through repetition and emotional intensity until it becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Telepathy, the silent communication between minds that are aligned in purpose. You can't force it, but you can cultivate it by surrounding yourself with people who share your vision and your 5 senses. They can deceive you. They can be manipulated. They show you the surface of reality, not its depths. You must learn to question what you see, hear, and feel, and verify it with reason and intuition. So how do you actually build self-discipline in a world designed to destroy it? Start with your appetites. Not because pleasure is evil, but because uncontrolled appetite is the fastest route to slavery. The person who cannot say no to food, to drink, to drugs, to endless scrolling, they are not free. They are hostages. And the ransom is their potential. Then master your time. Not by filling every minute with productivity, but by deciding in advance how you will spend your hours, and then honoring that decision as if it were a promise to someone you love, because it is. That someone is your future self. Then clarify your purpose. Self-discipline without purpose is just self-punishment. You need a reason that makes the hard choices feel meaningful, not comfortable, but meaningful. I want to close this chapter with a story about Mahatma Gandhi. Here was a man with no money, no army, no political office, no weapons, and yet he defeated the British Empire. How? Through self-discipline so absolute that it became a force of nature. He had definiteness of purpose, free India. He went the extra mile every single day, not for personal gain, but for 400 million people. He applied faith so completely that doubt had no room to enter. He built a mastermind alliance of millions who shared his vision, and he disciplined himself so rigorously that he became immune to the temptations that destroy ordinary men. Gandhi's power was not external, it was internal. It was the power of a human being who had mastered himself. And that power is available to you, not to free a nation, but to free yourself. From the habits that hold you back, from the emotions that control you, from the excuses that define you. The question is not whether you can build self-discipline. The question is whether you are willing to pay the price. Because the price is everything you currently are that is not serving who you want to become. And that price? It is paid daily, in the small hours of the morning, in the moments when no one is watching, in the choices that seem insignificant but compound into destiny. So here's what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. Pick one area of your life where you have been undisciplined, one promise you keep breaking to yourself, and make a different choice today, just once. Feel what it feels like to keep your word. Let that feeling become addictive. Let it become who you are, because the person who masters themselves, they don't need to master anyone else. The world bends toward them not because they demand it, but because they have become the kind of person the world naturally rewards. And that journey begins with a single act of self-discipline. Right now, today, the end of Chapter 9. Ella Chapter, The Lie You Tell Yourself. In 1938, a newspaper headline changed the course of history. Not because it was true, but because millions of people believed it was. Dewey defeats Truman. You probably know the story. The Chicago Tribune printed it before the votes were counted. Truman actually won. But here's what most people miss about that story. The people who read that headline didn't just believe a false fact. They built entire narratives around it. They made decisions based on it. They told their friends, their families, their business partners, and when the truth came out, many of them couldn't let go of the lie. Because by then, the lie had become part of their identity. This is the power of inaccurate thinking. And it doesn't just happen with newspaper headlines. It happens inside your mind, every single day. You tell yourself stories. Stories about why you failed. Stories about why others succeeded. Stories about what is possible and what is not. Stories about who you are and who you can never become. And most of these stories, they are not facts. They are opinions dressed up as truth. They are wishes pretending to be reality. They are fears masquerading as wisdom. Let me ask you something. How many of your beliefs about yourself did you actually choose? Think about that for a moment. Not the beliefs you inherited from your parents, Not the ones you absorbed from your friends in high school. Not the ones the algorithm fed you because you lingered on a post for 3 seconds too long. How many beliefs did you actually examine, test, and consciously adopt? For most people, the answer is terrifyingly close to zero. Accurate thinking is not about being smart. It's not about having a high IQ or a fancy degree. It's about having the courage to separate what you know from what you think you know, to separate facts from opinions,
To separate truth from the comfortable lies you've been telling yourself for years. There was a man who sat in a prison cell in 1923. He was a failed artist, a failed soldier, a nobody. But in that cell, he thought with a kind of obsessive intensity that most people never experience. And what he thought was this: the world had wronged him. A specific group of people was responsible for all his failures, and if he could just eliminate them, everything would be perfect. His thinking was not accurate. It was not based on facts. It was based on rage, on resentment, on a desperate need to blame someone else for his own inadequacies. But here's the thing: his thinking had power, because he believed it with absolute conviction. And belief, even false belief, has energy. It moves people. It moves armies. It moves history. That man was Adolf Hitler. And his story is a warning, not just about evil, but about what happens when inaccurate thinking is allowed to run wild. When opinions are treated as facts. When feelings are treated as evidence. When the mind becomes a weapon pointed at the world instead of a tool for understanding it. Now, you are probably not plotting world domination, but inaccurate thinking doesn't need grand ambitions to destroy you. It operates quietly, in the background, like malware on a computer. It tells you that you can't start a business because you don't have the right connections. Fact or opinion? Opinion. Millions of people have started businesses with no connections. It tells you that you're too old to learn a new skill. Fact or opinion? Opinion. Neuroscience has proven that the brain remains plastic and capable of learning throughout life. It tells you that successful people are just lucky. Fact or opinion? Opinion. Study after study shows that what looks like luck is usually the result of thousands of small decisions made consistently over time. It tells you that you need to be perfect before you start. Fact or opinion? Opinion. Every successful person you admire started imperfect, failed publicly, and kept going. Accurate thinking requires two things that most people find uncomfortable. First, induction. The ability to look at specific experiences and draw general conclusions from them. Not wild generalizations. Not, I failed once, therefore I am a failure. But careful, tested conclusions based on evidence. If every time you try to write, you get distracted by your phone, the accurate conclusion is not, I can't write. The accurate conclusion is, I need to remove my phone from my environment when I write. See the difference? One conclusion kills your dream. The other gives you a strategy. Second, deduction. The ability to take general principles and apply them to specific situations. If the general principle is that consistent effort compounds over time, then the deduction is that writing for 30 minutes every day will eventually produce a book. Not immediately. Not dramatically, but inevitably. Most people fail at accurate thinking because they want immediate confirmation. They want to see results before they believe. But accurate thinking often requires believing before you see. Not blind faith, but faith based on accurate understanding of how the world actually works. Now, let me tell you about the two biggest mistakes people make in their thinking. The first is credulousness, the habit of believing things without evidence. In the age of social media, this has become an epidemic. People share articles they haven't read. They form opinions based on headlines. They adopt political positions because their friends adopted them first. They buy products because an influencer told them to. They judge people based on 30-second clips taken out of context. Credulousness is not just lazy thinking. It is dangerous thinking. Because every belief you adopt without examination becomes part of your operating system, and a corrupted operating system produces corrupted results. The second mistake is the opposite: contempt prior to examination. The habit of rejecting ideas before understanding them. When the Wright brothers said they could fly, newspapers refused to send reporters. When Marconi said he could send messages through the air without wires, his own family had him examined by a psychiatrist. When someone suggests a new way of doing things at your workplace, the first response is usually resistance. That's not how we do things here. That will never work. We've tried that before. Contempt prior to examination is the voice of the ego trying to protect its territory. It is not the voice of wisdom. It is the voice of fear. Fear that you might have been wrong. Fear that you might need to change.
Fear that the world is bigger and more complex than your current understanding allows. Accurate thinking sits in the middle of these two extremes. It does not believe everything. It does not reject everything. It examines. It tests. It holds ideas loosely enough to let them go when evidence contradicts them, and firmly enough to act on them when evidence supports them. I want you to think about your own mind as a garden. Most people's minds are not gardens. They are junkyards, filled with other people's discarded ideas, broken beliefs, rusted opinions that never worked for anyone. An accurate thinker tends their garden carefully. They don't let just any seed take root. They examine each one. Where did this come from? Is it based on fact or feeling? Has it been tested? Does it serve my definite purpose? And when they find a weed, an inaccurate belief, a false assumption, a borrowed opinion, they pull it out. Not gently, not hesitantly, but completely. Because they know that one weed left unchecked will choke everything else. Here's a practice that will change your thinking forever. Before you accept any piece of information as fact, ask these 6 questions. 1. Is the source a recognized authority on this subject? Not just famous, not just loud, but actually knowledgeable. 2. Does the source have a motive other than sharing accurate information? Are they selling something? Are they trying to win an argument? Are they protecting their ego? 3. Does the source have a profit interest in what they're telling you? Financial profit? Social profit? Emotional profit? 4. Is this person of sound judgment, or are they a fanatic? Fanatics are consistent, but they are consistently wrong in the same direction. 5. Can I verify this independently? Are there sources I can check? Evidence I can examine? 6. Does this harmonize with common sense and my own experience? Not my wishful thinking, not my fears, but actual, tested reality. Most people will never do this. It's too much work. It slows down the dopamine hit of having an opinion. It interrupts the rush of feeling right. But accurate thinkers are willing to be slow. They are willing to be uncertain. They are willing to say, I don't know yet, instead of rushing to a conclusion that feels good but isn't true. I want to close with a truth that will either liberate you or terrify you. Your thoughts are the only thing you completely control. Not your circumstances, not other people, not the economy, not your past. But your thoughts, they are yours. Every single one of them. And if you are not controlling them, someone else is. The algorithm controls them. The news controls them. Your friends control them. Your fears control them. Accurate thinking is the act of taking back control, of saying, these thoughts are mine. I will examine them. I will test them. I will keep what is true and discard what is false. And I will build my life on a foundation of reality, not illusion. Because at the end of the day, there is only one thing more dangerous than a lie told by someone else. It is the lie you tell yourself, and the lie you believe, and the lie you live. Accurate thinking is the antidote. It is not comfortable. It is not popular, but it is the only path to a life built on something real. And that reality, it is the only foundation that can support the weight of your dreams. End of Chapter 10. Lay, Chapter, The Art of Unbroken Focus. There is a company in Silicon Valley that most people have never heard of. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded so quietly, so completely, that they became invisible in their own dominance. Keeler and Long. They make industrial paint, not the paint you buy at Home Depot for your bedroom. Paint that can withstand a nuclear meltdown. Paint that lasts decades on electrical transformers. Paint that the White House uses. They didn't get there by diversifying. They didn't get there by chasing trends. They got there by doing one thing, and one thing only, better than anyone else in the world. That is the power of controlled attention. Now, let me tell you about the opposite. You know that feeling when you sit down to work, and suddenly your phone buzzes? You check it, just a notification. But now you're thinking about what you saw. So you open another app. 20 minutes later, you can't remember what you were working on. And the worst part? You tell yourself it was just a quick break. You tell yourself you'll focus better now. But the truth is, you've just fractured your attention into 1,000 pieces. And it will take 23 minutes to fully recover. 23 minutes. Every single time you get distracted. Do the math. How many times did you check your phone today? How many hours of deep work did you lose to fragments of attention? Controlled attention is not about trying harder to focus. It's about understanding that your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. More valuable than money. More valuable than time. Because without attention, time is just empty duration. Without attention, money is just numbers on a screen.
Your attention is the lens through which you experience reality. It is the filter that determines what gets into your mind, what shapes your thoughts, what becomes your life. And right now, there is a war being fought for that attention. Not with guns, not with armies, but with algorithms designed by the smartest engineers in the world to capture and hold your focus for as long as possible. They are not your friends.
They are not neutral. They are competitors in the attention economy, and they are winning. Let me be direct with you. The average person checks their phone 96 times a day. That's once every 10 minutes. The average attention span has dropped below 8 seconds. Shorter than a goldfish. This is not an accident. This is the result of billions of dollars in research designed to make you this way. To make you reactive instead of proactive. To make you scattered instead of focused. To make you a consumer of other people's agendas instead of a creator of your own. And the most terrifying part? Most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're choosing to scroll. They think they're in control. They are not. Controlled attention is the act of coordinating every faculty of your mind and directing their combined power toward a single, definite purpose. It is not multitasking. Multitasking is a lie. Neuroscience has proven that the brain cannot focus on two complex tasks simultaneously. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching. And every switch costs you. It costs you depth. It costs you quality. It costs you the very thing that makes human achievement possible. Sustained, unbroken concentration. Think about the people you admire most. The artists who created work that moved you. The scientists who discovered things that changed the world. The entrepreneurs who built something from nothing. The athletes who performed feats that seemed impossible. What do they all have in common? Not talent alone, not luck, not resources. They had the ability to focus their attention so completely on one thing that the rest of the world faded away. Marcel Proust spent 14 years writing one book, one massive, sprawling, 7-volume novel, Remembrance of Things Past. He didn't write it while checking Twitter. He wrote it in a cork-lined room, isolating himself from the world, because he understood that creation requires protection. Protection from distraction. Protection from the 1,000 small demands that eat your attention alive. Now I know what you're thinking. I can't isolate myself in a cork-lined room. I have a job. I have responsibilities. I have a life. Fair enough. But controlled attention is not about eliminating all distractions. It's about choosing what deserves your attention and protecting that choice with your life. Here's what that looks like in practice. First, definiteness of purpose. You cannot focus on everything. You cannot be excellent at everything. You must choose what matters most and let everything else become secondary. Intel chose microprocessors. They didn't try to make software. They didn't try to make modems. They chose one thing, and they became the best in the world at it. What is your one thing? Not your 5 things, not your 10 things. Your one thing, the thing that, if you mastered it, would change everything. Second, the Mastermind Alliance. Controlled attention does not mean working alone. It means surrounding yourself with people who share your focus, who amplify your concentration instead of fragmenting it. When you are with people who are scattered, you become scattered. When you are with people who are focused, you become focused. It's not magic. It's psychology. The human mind is designed to synchronize with the minds around it. Choose your synchronization partners carefully. Third, applied faith. It is much easier to focus on something you believe will happen than something you doubt. Doubt fractures attention. It splits your focus between the task at hand and the anxiety about whether it will work. Faith, not blind faith, but faith based on accurate thinking and past evidence, allows you to commit fully, to pour your entire attention into the present moment because you trust that the future will take care of itself. Fourth, positive mental attitude. A negative mind is a distracted mind. When you are consumed by fear, doubt, and worry, your attention is pulled in 1,000 directions. You are not working on your goal. You are managing your anxiety about your goal. A positive mental attitude clears the debris. It removes the mental clutter that competes for your attention. It creates space for deep, sustained focus. Fifth, going the extra mile. When you are fully focused, work stops feeling like work. It becomes a flow state. A state where time disappears, where effort becomes effortless, where you and the task become one. This is not a mystical experience. It is a neurological one, and it is available to anyone who is willing to pay the price of sustained attention. Now, let me tell you about autosuggestion. Not the cheesy self-help version. The real version. Every thought you think is recorded in your subconscious. Every word you speak. Every image you hold in your mind. If your dominant thoughts are about what you fear, what you lack, what you don't want, your subconscious is being programmed for scarcity. If your dominant thoughts are about your definite purpose, your plan, your vision of success, your subconscious is being programmed for achievement. Controlled attention is the medium through which you program your subconscious. It is how you tell your deeper mind what matters. And your deeper mind, once it knows, will work 24 hours a day to make it real. But here's what most people get wrong. They think controlled attention means forcing themselves to think about their goal all the time. That's not it. That's obsession. That's burnout waiting to happen. Controlled attention means choosing what to focus on in each moment. When you are working, you are fully working. When you are resting, you are fully resting. When you are with people you love, you are fully present with them.
The person who is always thinking about work while with their family is not practicing controlled attention. They are practicing fractured attention. They are nowhere fully, they are everywhere partially. And partial presence produces partial results. I want to close with a question. When was the last time you gave something your complete, undivided attention? Not half, not most. All of it. If you can't remember, that is not a personal failing. It is the environment you are living in. It is the design of the world around you. But it is also a choice you are making, moment by moment, day by day. Controlled attention is not a talent. It is a discipline. It is a practice. It is a decision you make every single time you feel the pull of distraction and choose to stay where you are. Your attention is your life. Where it goes, your energy flows. Where your energy flows, your reality grows. So choose. Choose what deserves the precious resource of your focus. Protect it like the treasure it is. And watch as the scattered pieces of your potential begin to assemble themselves into something the world has never seen before. Because the person who can focus, they are unstoppable. Not because they are special, but because they have learned the most important skill of the 21st century. The art of unbroken focus. Lil Jeffring. End of chapter 11. LA chapter, or loneliness of the lonely leader. There was a shoeshine boy in a factory in Dayton, Ohio, 11 years old, charging a nickel per shine, giving his mother $10 every Friday, putting $5 in the bank, keeping $2 for himself, saving secretly for a bicycle his mother didn't know about. The boy who had his job before him, 17 years old, quit because he couldn't make a living. Same factory, same customers, same price. So what was the difference? The younger boy smiled. He said thank you. He expected success, and so he found it. The older boy was indifferent, moody, and never took the trouble to express gratitude. So that was all he got, a nickel. No tips, no repeat customers, no future. This story was told by Hugh Chalmers to a room full of salesmen in 1912. They worked for National Cash Register. The company was in trouble. Rumors of bankruptcy were spreading. Sales were plummeting, and the salesmen were making excuses. Drought in their territories. Election year uncertainty. Competitors cutting prices. Hard luck stories everywhere. Chalmers didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't offer bonuses or fire anyone. He told them about a shoeshine boy. And then he asked them a question that cut through every excuse like a knife. Are you working your territory with a smile on your face, expecting success? Or are you carrying a negative mind, finding reasons to fail before you even try? That night, those salesmen went back to their territories with a new spirit. Not because Chalmers gave them a strategy. Not because he gave them new leads or better prices. Because he made them feel part of something larger than themselves. He made them feel seen. He made them feel that their attitude mattered, that their effort mattered, that they mattered. That year, National Cash Register had one of its most profitable years in history. Not because the market changed, not because the product changed, because the people changed. And they changed because one man understood something that most leaders never learn. Teamwork is not about getting people to do what you want. It's about making them want what you want. Now, let me tell you something that will make you uncomfortable. The loneliest people in the world are not the ones who are alone. They are the ones who are surrounded by people, but cannot inspire any of them to truly join them. You can have 100 employees. You can have 1,000 followers on social media. You can have a family that lives in the same house. But if no one is truly with you, if no one shares your vision, your purpose, your fire, then you are alone. And that loneliness is the most destructive force in leadership. Most people think teamwork means coordination. It doesn't.
Coordination is logistics. Teamwork is spirit. Coordination is getting people to show up at the same time. Teamwork is getting people to show up with their hearts. And the difference between those two things?
It is the difference between a machine and a movement, between a company that functions and a company that transforms, between a group of individuals and a force of nature. I want you to think about the best team you've ever been part of. Maybe it was a sports team. Maybe it was a project at work. Maybe it was a group of friends who came together for something important. What made it special? Was it the talent of the individuals? Sometimes, but not always. I've seen teams of geniuses fail because they couldn't work together. And I've seen teams of ordinary people achieve extraordinary things because they moved as one. Was it the resources they had? Rarely. Underdog stories exist for a reason, because limited resources, when combined with unlimited spirit, can defeat any opponent. Was it the leader's charisma? Partially, but charisma without substance is a firework, bright, loud, and gone in seconds. No, the thing that made that team special was something invisible, something you can't put on a spreadsheet or measure in a quarterly report. It was the feeling that everyone mattered, that no one's contribution was too small to be seen, that the success of one was the success of all, that failure was shared, but so was victory. Peter Drucker, the management guru, once said something that most managers ignore. All employees have to see themselves as executives, not in title, not in salary, but in responsibility, in ownership, in the sense that what they do matters to the whole. General Douglas MacArthur understood this. He started every staff meeting with a presentation from the most junior officer in the room, and he allowed no interruptions. Not because the junior officer had the most important information, but because MacArthur knew that confidence is built in moments of being heard, that a person who feels their voice matters will use it to serve the mission, and a person who feels invisible will eventually become invisible in their effort too. Now, let me be honest about something. True teamwork is rare, not because people don't want it, but because it requires something that most leaders are unwilling to give: power, real power. Not the illusion of power, not the title of power, but the actual transfer of decision-making, of ownership, of consequence, from the leader to the team. Most leaders say they want teamwork. What they actually want is compliance with a smile. They want people to execute their vision without questioning it, to follow without leading, to serve without growing. That is not teamwork. That is servitude with better marketing. Charles McCormick understood the difference. When he took over McCormick & Company, he didn't just want workers. He wanted partners. So he created something radical for its time: a junior board of directors. 17 young people from the front office, given the power to examine everything the company did, to make recommendations, to be heard by the actual board. A flood of energy was released. People who had been glorified clerks suddenly tasted responsibility, and they clamored for more, not because McCormick paid them more, but because he made them feel that their minds mattered. Here's a truth that will change how you lead forever. People will work harder for personal recognition and a word of commendation than they will for money alone. This is not sentimentality. This is psychology. The human need to matter is deeper than the human need for material comfort. A person who feels like a cog in a machine will eventually become a cog in a machine. They will do the minimum. They will watch the clock. They will leave as soon as something better comes along. But a person who feels like a vital organ in a living body, they will give everything. They will stay late not because they have to, but because they want to. They will solve problems no one asked them to solve. They will care about the success of the whole because they understand that their success is inseparable from it. I want to talk about something uncomfortable now. The United States and the Soviet Union were allies in World War II. They fought together. They died together. They defeated a common enemy together. And the moment that enemy was gone, the alliance evaporated. Not gradually, instantly. Because their teamwork was not based on shared values or genuine cooperation. It was based on necessity. It was transactional, and transactional teamwork dies the moment the transaction is complete. This is what most people get wrong about teamwork in their own lives. They build alliances based on what they can get, not on what they can give. They network with people who can help them advance. They marry people who complete their image. They befriend people who make them feel important. And when those people no longer serve their purpose, the teamwork ends. The connection breaks. The loneliness returns, deeper than before, because now they know that their relationships were never real. True teamwork is built on something else entirely. It is built on the recognition that we are not separate, that your success is my success,
that your pain is my pain, that the space between us is not empty but filled with the possibility of what we can create together. This is not idealism. This is biology. We are wired for cooperation. Our ancestors survived not because they were the strongest, but because they could coordinate, communicate, and care for each other. The human brain literally changes when we feel connected to others. Stress hormones decrease. Oxytocin increases. We become smarter, more creative, more resilient. Isolation makes us stupid. Connection makes us brilliant. So how do you inspire this kind of teamwork? Not the fake kind. Not the transactional kind, but the real kind. The kind that survives the hard times. The kind that outlasts the original purpose. First, give before you ask. Most people approach teamwork with a shopping list of what they need. I need you to do this. I need you to believe that. I need you to support me. But teamwork is not a marketplace. It is a garden. And gardens don't produce fruit because you demand it. They produce fruit because you tend them. Second, see people. Really see them. Not their function. Not their role. Not what they can do for you. But who they are. Their fears. Their dreams. The unique contribution only they can make. Third, share the struggle. Nothing builds teamwork like shared adversity. Not manufactured adversity. Not team-building exercises where everyone falls backward into each other's arms. But real struggle. Real risk. Real moments where failure is possible and success is uncertain. Fourth, share the victory. Not just the credit. Not just the bonus. But the meaning. Let people know that what they did mattered. That without them, it wouldn't have happened. That their specific contribution was the difference between success and failure. I want to close with something Hugh Chalmers understood that most people don't. Teamwork costs almost nothing in time and effort. A kind word, a moment of genuine listening, a decision to trust someone with responsibility, a willingness to say, you were right when you were wrong, and it pays dividends that compound forever, loyalty that outlasts better offers, creativity that exceeds your own, resilience that survives crises you couldn't survive alone. The person who masters teamwork is not the person who has the most followers. They are the person who has the most genuine partners. People who would follow them not because they have to, but because they want to. Because they believe in the same thing. Because they know that together, they are something they could never be alone. So here's the question I want you to sit with. Are you building a team? Or are you building an audience? Are you creating partners? Or are you collecting subordinates? Are you inspiring people to join you in something larger than themselves? Or are you using people to build something larger for yourself? The answer to that question will determine everything. Your success, your happiness, your legacy, and yes, your loneliness. Because the leader who cannot inspire teamwork, they may have the title, they may have the money, they may have the corner office with the view, but they will always be alone. And there is no success that can fill that emptiness. Later, Chapter 12. And Chapter, The Invisible Architect. Creative Vision in a World of Imitators. In the winter of 1971, a track coach in Oregon sat at his breakfast table, staring at a waffle iron. Not eating from it. Not making waffles. Just staring. His wife had made breakfast. He was supposed to be present, to be a husband, to have a Sunday morning. But his mind was somewhere else. For months, Bill Bowerman had been obsessed with a problem. His runners needed better shoes. The existing designs were heavy, rigid, destructive to the foot over long distances. He had tinkered with rubber, with canvas, with every material he could find. Nothing worked. And then, on this ordinary Sunday, his gaze drifted from his wife's face to the waffle iron on the counter. The grid pattern, the way the batter filled each square, creating structure without weight. The way heat transformed something soft into something rigid, something that could hold shape without being heavy. He didn't say anything. He just stood up, walked to the garage, and poured liquid rubber into a waffle iron. It ruined the iron. His wife was furious. But he had seen something that no one else had seen. The waffle sole. Lightweight. Flexible. With grip that adapted to the surface beneath it. That ruined waffle iron became the foundation of Nike, a company that would eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. All because one man looked at a kitchen appliance and saw a running shoe. This is creative vision. Not genius. Not talent. Not some divine spark that only the chosen few receive. Creative vision is the ability to see relationships that don't yet exist, to look at A and B and perceive C before C has ever been made. And here's what makes this principle so uncomfortable for most people.
Creative vision is not about being smart. It's about being brave. Because the moment you see something that doesn't exist yet, you become responsible for it.
You can no longer say, someone should do that. You have to say, I will do that. Or live with the quiet erosion of knowing you didn't. Napoleon Hill identified two forms of imagination. He called them synthetic imagination and creative imagination. And understanding the difference between them is the difference between being a remixer and being an originator. Synthetic imagination is what most people use. It's valuable, it's necessary, but it's limited. Synthetic imagination takes what already exists and rearranges it. It combines the garbage can with plastic to make the garbage bag. It takes the Walkman and the hard drive and makes the iPod. It looks at Uber and says, what if we did that for dog walking? For healthcare? For grocery delivery? There's nothing wrong with this. Most of modern business is synthetic imagination. Most of what we call innovation is just recombination. But synthetic imagination has a ceiling. It can only create variations on themes that already exist. It cannot originate. It cannot birth something from nothing. Creative imagination is different. Creative imagination, Hill believed, is the channel through which entirely new ideas enter human consciousness. It's the source of hunches and inspirations that seem to come from nowhere. It's what happens when the conscious mind is vibrating at a rate high enough, through intense desire, through focused attention, through emotional engagement, to receive signals from. What Hill called infinite intelligence. Now I know how that sounds. Infinite intelligence. Vibrating minds. It sounds like something you'd find in a New Age bookstore between crystals and tarot cards. But strip away the language of Hill's era, and what's left is something that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. In the late 1800s, there was a man named Elmer Gates. You've probably never heard of him, but in his time, he was one of the most prolific inventors in American history. His patents outnumbered Edison's 2-to-1. He invented the foam fire extinguisher, climate-controlled air conditioning, an early electronic music synthesizer. His laboratory in Chevy Chase, Maryland, was the largest private non-commercial lab in the United States. But Gates wasn't primarily an inventor. He was a psychologist. He studied the mind, his own mind, the way a physicist studies particles. Gates developed something he called psychotaxis, the systematic hierarchy of sensory experiences that builds a complete mental representation of any subject. He would immerse himself in a field, not by reading about it, but by experiencing it, touching the materials, smelling the chemicals, operating the machines, building the sensory foundation from the ground up. Then he would enter a soundproof room, sit in darkness, turn off every external stimulus, and concentrate on a specific problem with such intensity that his conscious mind became a receiver rather than a generator. Sometimes ideas came immediately. Sometimes he waited for an hour in silence. Sometimes nothing came at all. But occasionally, and these were the moments that built his legacy, he would receive solutions, so complete, so unexpected, that they seemed to arrive from outside himself. Ideas for problems he wasn't even thinking about. Connections his conscious mind had never made. Inventions that changed industries. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not telling you to sit in dark rooms and wait for divine inspiration. That's not practical advice for someone building a business, writing a book, or trying to solve a real problem in 2026. But there is something Gates understood that we have largely forgotten. Creative vision requires subtraction before it can produce addition. You cannot create something new while your mind is saturated with the old. You cannot hear original ideas while your attention is fragmented across 37 notifications. You cannot see what doesn't exist yet if your eyes are constantly scanning what already does. This is why the most creative people in history have almost always been outsiders. Immigrants who saw their adopted country with fresh eyes. Self-taught inventors who weren't bound by the conventions of their field. Artists who came from poverty, from marginalization, from places where the existing rules had never applied to them anyway. When you don't know how things are supposed to be done, you are free to see how they could be done. Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated from law school in 1959. Top of her class, brilliant legal mind, and not a single law firm in New York would hire her, because she was a woman, because the existing architecture of the legal profession had no room for someone like her. So she became a law secretary, then a professor. Then she started building cases that no one else would touch, gender discrimination cases that seemed unwinnable, that challenged the very foundations of how the law understood equality. She didn't have the synthetic imagination of a lawyer who knew how to work within the system. She had the creative vision of someone who could see a system that didn't exist yet, and had the patience to build it, case by case, decade by decade, until it became real. Eventually, she sat on the Supreme Court. Not because she fit into the existing structure, because she had imagined a structure where someone like her belonged, and then made the world agree. But here's the danger of creative vision, and it's a danger that destroys more potential than any lack of talent ever could. Creative vision without action is not creativity, it's fantasy. It's the person who has amazing ideas every week and never executes a single one.
It's the dreamer who dies with their museum in their head, surrounded by blueprints that never became buildings. Hill understood this intimately. He spent his life not just studying successful people, but studying the gap between vision and execution. And he found that the bridge across that gap is not willpower. It's not discipline. It's not even grinding or hustling. The bridge is definiteness of purpose. When your vision is tied to a purpose so clear, so urgent, so emotionally charged that you cannot not act, then action becomes inevitable. Not easy, not comfortable, but inevitable. Thomas Edison didn't fail 10,000 times because he was stubborn. He failed 10,000 times because he had a purpose, to create electric light that was more real to him than the evidence of his repeated failures. The failures were data, the purpose was gravity, and gravity always wins. I want to talk about something that Hill never could have anticipated: the age of artificial intelligence, the age of generative models that can produce text, images, music, code, seemingly from nothing. What does creative vision mean when a machine can remix faster than any human? I think it means creative vision matters more than ever, but not in the way we think. AI is the ultimate synthetic imagination. It can recombine existing patterns with breathtaking speed and precision. It can produce variations on themes that would take humans lifetimes, but it cannot originate. It cannot want. It cannot look at a waffle iron and see a running shoe, because it doesn't run. It doesn't feel the ache in a runner's feet. It doesn't care about the problem enough to ruin a kitchen appliance over it. AI has no purpose, and purpose is the engine of creative vision. The future doesn't belong to people who can generate the most content. It belongs to people who can ask the questions that no one else is asking, who can see the problems that everyone else has accepted as permanent, who can hold a vision of what should be, not what is, not what was, not what the algorithm predicts will be, and refuse to let it go until it becomes real. So how do you cultivate creative vision? Not as a gift, not as a talent, but as a practice. First, you protect your inputs. The modern world is designed to flood your mind with other people's visions. Social media feeds you the curated highlights of millions of lives. News algorithms show you what they think you should care about. Entertainment is engineered to be maximally engaging, which means maximally predictable, which means maximally derivative. If you consume only what already exists, you will produce only what already exists. This is not a moral judgment. It's a mechanical fact. Second, you create space for silence. Not meditation as wellness culture understands it. Not mindfulness as a productivity hack. But genuine, unstructured, unmeasured time where your mind is not performing, not producing, not optimizing. Time where your subconscious can process, connect, gestate. Gates had his dark room. Newton had his apple orchard. Archimedes had his bath. Kekulé discovered the structure of benzene in a dream about a snake eating its own tail. These are not accidents. They are the natural result of a mind that has been fed rich material and then given the space to digest it. Third, you develop the courage to be wrong. Creative vision is inherently risky. By definition, you are proposing something that has not been validated by existing success. You are stepping into territory where there are no maps, no mentors, no guarantee. The Wright brothers were mocked for believing humans could fly. Marconi's relatives had him examined by a psychiatrist for claiming he could send messages through the air without wires. Every genuinely new idea looks insane to the people who are comfortable with the old ones. If you need external validation before you act on your vision will die in committee. The committee of your own fears. The committee of well-meaning friends who want to protect you from disappointment. The committee of industry experts who are invested in the current paradigm. I want to leave you with a story about F. W. Woolworth. In 1879, Woolworth was a clerk in a hardware store. Not a particularly good clerk. Not destined for greatness by any conventional measure. Just a young man trying to survive. One day,
His boss complained about a pile of outdated inventory that wasn't selling. Items that had been sitting on shelves for months, collecting dust, tying up capital. The boss was frustrated. He wanted them gone. Woolworth looked at that pile of unwanted goods and saw something his boss couldn't see. He saw a table. He saw a sign that said, "Everything 10 cents." He saw customers who couldn't afford the regular merchandise but would flock to a bargain. His boss let him try it. The table sold out in hours. The boss was thrilled and immediately began searching for more outdated stock to put on that table. But Woolworth saw something bigger. He saw an entire store built on this principle. Not a discount section of an existing store. A new kind of store entirely. Where everything was affordable. Where the working class could shop with dignity. Where volume replaced margin as the engine of profit. His boss didn't see it. He was too invested in the existing model. Too comfortable with the way things had always been done. Years later, that boss reportedly said, "Every word I used in turning that man's offer down has cost me about $1 million. This is the invisible architect. The person who sees not what is, but what could be, who looks at the same world everyone else looks at, and sees a different world entirely. It's not about intelligence. It's not about education. It's not about resources, or connections, or luck. It's about the willingness to look at the familiar until it becomes strange. To look at the obvious until it reveals its hidden assumptions. To look at the accepted until you can see the crack where something new might grow. And here's the truth that most people will never accept. You already have creative vision, right now. In this moment, you have it. What you may not have is the courage to trust it, the discipline to protect it, the patience to let it develop, the definiteness of purpose to act on it when it arrives. But those are all learnable, all practicable, all within reach. The only question is whether you will do the work. Because creative vision without a body to carry it is just a ghost. An idea without execution is just a haunting. And the next principle we're going to explore is about the body. The physical, biological, irreplaceable body that turns vision into reality. Not as an afterthought, not as a machine to be optimized, but as the sacred ground where all achievement actually happens. When we return, we enter the engine room, the place where mind and body meet, and where most people discover, often too late, that they have been neglecting the only vehicle that can carry them to the destination they seek. End of chapter 14. Next, chapter 15, the engine and the driver, chapter, the engine and the driver. Why your body is the foundation of everything. There is a lie that modern culture tells you. A lie so pervasive, so seductive, so perfectly engineered for the age of screens and optimization, that most people never even recognize it as a lie. The lie is this: your mind and your body are separate. Your mind is the real you, the thinker, the planner, the achiever. Your body is just the vehicle, the container, the thing you fuel and maintain so that the real you can get where it's going. And like all effective lies, this one contains a fragment of truth. Your body is a vehicle. It does carry your mind through the world. But the separation, the idea that you are somehow in your body the way a driver is in a car, that is the distortion that destroys more potential than almost any other belief you hold. Because you are not a driver in a car. You are the engine and the driver, the navigator and the ship, the instrument and the musician. And when one part of that system fails, the entire system fails, no matter how brilliant the other part might be. Let me tell you about David. David was 31 when I met him. He was what most people would call successful. VP at a tech company. Equity stake. Salary that would make most people wince with envy. A corner office with a view of the water. He was also 40 pounds overweight. He hadn't slept more than 5 hours a night in 3 years. He drank 4 coffees before noon and switched to whiskey after 6. His blood pressure was in the range that doctors describe with words like concerning and we need to talk. But David didn't care about any of that. Because David believed, truly, deeply, unconsciously believed, that his body was just the rental car his mind was driving. And when the rental car broke down, he'd just get another one. Or fix this one just enough to keep moving. Or ignore the warning lights because he had places to be. Then, one Tuesday morning in March, David woke up and couldn't see clearly out of his left eye. Just for a moment. 30 seconds, maybe less. A gray fog that passed like a cloud. Then his vision returned, and he convinced himself it was nothing. Fatigue, eye strain from too many screens. He had a presentation at 10, and he couldn't afford to be distracted. The second episode happened 3 weeks later. This time, the fog lasted 2 minutes.
And when it cleared, David felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Not the anxiety of a deadline or the stress of a difficult conversation. Real fear. The kind that comes from your body speaking a language your mind can't ignore anymore. The MRI showed a small lesion in his occipital lobe. Not a tumor, thank God, not a tumor, but a warning. A physical manifestation of years of chronic stress, poor sleep, inflammatory diet, and the slow erosion of a system that had been screaming for attention while its owner pretended not to hear. David took 3 months off work. The first month, he mostly slept.
The second month, he started walking. Slowly at first, then farther, then with something approaching enjoyment. The third month, he started cooking. Not ordering, not heating. Actual cooking. Vegetables, grains, proteins. The kind of food that doesn't come with an app or a delivery driver. When he returned to work, he was different. Not dramatically. Not in ways that everyone could see, but in ways that mattered. He made decisions more slowly, and they were better decisions. He listened more carefully in meetings, and he heard things he had been missing for years. He said no to projects that would have once triggered his fear of missing out, and the projects he said yes to, he completed with a quality that surprised even himself. Most importantly, he told me, he stopped feeling like he was at war with himself. The part of him that wanted to achieve and the part of him that needed rest stopped being enemies. They became collaborators. Two aspects of the same organism, working toward the same purpose. Napoleon Hill understood something in the 1930s that modern neuroscience is only now validating with fMRI machines and cortisol studies. Your mind and your body are not just connected. They are one system, a single, integrated, inseparable organism, and whatever affects one, affects the other, instantly, completely, and often in ways that are invisible until they become catastrophic. Hill called this the mind-body. Not mind and body, mind-body. One word, because one thing. And he believed, passionately, based on his interviews with hundreds of the most successful people of his era, that the health of this mind-body was the foundation of all achievement. Not a nice-to-have, not a wellness bonus. The foundation, the operating system on which every application of success runs. Nature moves in rhythms. The ocean has its tides. The earth has its seasons. The moon waxes and wanes. Your heart beats in cycles. Your breath rises and falls. Even your cells, the fundamental units of your physical existence, operate in oscillating patterns of activity and rest. There is nothing static in nature, nothing that maintains peak output indefinitely. Everything pulses, everything breathes, everything follows the ancient pattern of expansion and contraction, exertion and recovery, creation and integration. And yet, modern life demands linearity, constant productivity, perpetual availability, the same output day after day, regardless of season, regardless of cycle, regardless of the deep biological intelligence that knows you are not a machine. This is not a complaint about hustle culture. It's not a critique of capitalism, or technology, or the modern workplace. Those are surface symptoms. The deeper issue is this. We have forgotten how to listen to our own rhythms. Hill wrote about a man who understood rhythms better than almost anyone in modern history. His name was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. You may know him as the Russian writer who survived the Soviet gulags and then wrote about them with such devastating precision that the world could no longer pretend not to know. But what most people don't know is how he structured his life after survival. Solzhenitsyn was exiled to the United States in the 1970s. He became an international celebrity, invited to every talk show, offered every platform, pursued by every publisher and producer who wanted a piece of his moral authority. He could have spent the rest of his life being interviewed, being celebrated, being seen. Instead, he moved to a small town in Vermont. He bought a house. He established a routine so rigid, so seemingly monastic, that people who met him often described him as austere, even cold. Every morning he woke at 6, a small breakfast. Then he wrote. He stopped for a brief lunch. Then he wrote again, often until late evening, sometimes until the sun rose the next morning. He didn't answer the phone. He rarely left home. He declined almost every invitation to appear on television, to give interviews, to attend events. For years, people thought he was wasting his influence, hiding from the world, squandering the platform he had earned through such suffering. But Solzhenitsyn understood something that his critics didn't. He understood that his creative work, the historical epic he was writing, called The Red Wheel, was the reason he had survived.
Not just survived the gulags, but survived fame, survived exile, survived the seductive destruction of a life built on other people's attention. And he understood that this work required a specific kind of physical and mental environment, one that he had to protect with the same ferocity that had kept him alive in the camps. When the Soviet Union finally collapsed, everyone expected him to rush back to Moscow, to claim his place in the new Russia, to become the prophet of the new era. He stayed in Vermont. He kept writing, because he knew that the work was not finished, and that finishing it was more important than any moment of historical drama, any opportunity for recognition, any temptation to be seen rather than to be substantive. This is what Hill meant by sound health, not the absence of disease, not the pursuit of longevity, not the optimization of biomarkers or the accumulation of wellness practices. Sound health is the alignment of your physical existence with your deepest purpose. It is the recognition that your body is not the enemy of your ambition, it is the instrument of it. And like any instrument, it must be tuned, protected, and played with skill. Let me be direct with you for a moment, because this is where most people disconnect. They hear health, and they think of gym memberships they don't use, diets they abandon by Wednesday, the vague guilt that accompanies another night of poor sleep and too much screen time. But I'm not talking about guilt. I'm not talking about moral failure or willpower deficiency or any of the shame-based narratives that the wellness industry sells you. I'm talking about physics. Your body is a system that operates according to physical laws. When you violate those laws consistently, the system degrades. Not because you're bad, not because you're weak, because you're human, and humans are biological organisms, not mechanical devices. Consider fear. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a physical state. When you experience fear, real fear, not the mild anxiety of a difficult email, your body undergoes a cascade of changes that evolution designed to keep you alive in the presence of immediate physical threat. Your heart rate increases. Blood is diverted from digestion to your muscles. Your pupils dilate. Your hearing becomes more acute. Adrenaline floods your system. Cortisol begins its slower, more destructive release. This is called the fight-or-flight response, and it is one of the most powerful physiological mechanisms you possess. It kept your ancestors alive when predators appeared at the edge of the firelight. It prepared them to run, to fight, to survive. But here's the problem. Your body cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and an angry email from your boss, between a physical threat to your survival and a social threat to your ego, between genuine danger and the manufactured anxiety of modern life. And when you activate this response repeatedly, daily, hourly, sometimes minute by minute, you are asking your body to live in a state of emergency, permanently, without recovery, without the rest phase that evolution assumed would follow every burst of survival energy. The result? Chronic stress, inflammation, immune dysfunction, cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, emotional dysregulation, the slow, invisible erosion of the very system that makes everything else possible. Hill identified fear as one of the greatest destroyers of mental and physical health, not because fear is bad. Fear is necessary. Fear is intelligent. Fear keeps you alive. But fear that is chronic, unmanaged, and based on threats that exist only in your imagination, that fear is a poison. And the antidote is not positive thinking. It's not affirmations or vision boards or any of the superficial interventions that treat symptoms while ignoring causes. The antidote is alignment. Alignment between what your mind believes and what your body experiences. Between the demands you place on yourself and the resources you actually possess. Between the pace of your ambition and the rhythm of your biology. Let me tell you about the rhythms that Hill believed were essential. Work followed by play. Mental effort followed by physical effort. Seriousness followed by humor. Sexual expression followed by sublimation into creative work. These are not Victorian moralisms. They are biological truths. They are the patterns that allow your nervous system to recover, your hormones to rebalance, your mind to integrate what it has learned. And the most important rhythm of all? The rhythm of rest. Sleep is not a luxury. I want you to hear that. Really hear it. Sleep is not a luxury. It is not something you earn by working hard enough. It is not a weakness to be overcome with caffeine and ambition. It is the single most important biological process for maintaining the health of your mind-body. During sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, a process that is dramatically more active during deep sleep than during wakefulness.
Your memories consolidate. Your emotional experiences are processed and integrated. Your creativity is fed by the random recombinations that occur when your conscious mind is offline. Your immune system is calibrated. Your hormones are regulated. Every hour of sleep you sacrifice in the name of productivity is an hour of maintenance you are deferring. And deferred maintenance, as any engineer will tell you, always costs more than scheduled maintenance. Always. Hill recommended 6 to 8 hours. Modern sleep science suggests 7 to 9 for most adults. But the exact number matters less than the quality and consistency. Going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time. Creating a ritual that signals to your body, this is when we rest. This is when we recover. This is when we prepare for what comes next.
Exercise is the second pillar. Not for appearance, not for social media, not even primarily for longevity, though that is a welcome side effect. Exercise is for your mind, for your emotional regulation, for your capacity to handle stress without being destroyed by it, for the clarity of thought that comes when your blood is moving, your oxygen is flowing, your brain is receiving the fuel it needs to function at its highest capacity. Hill didn't have access to the neuroscience we have today. He didn't know about BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein that exercise increases, which literally grows new neurons and strengthens existing connections. He didn't know about the antidepressant effects of regular movement, which rival pharmaceutical interventions in clinical studies. He didn't know about the cognitive enhancement that follows even a single session of moderate exercise, but he observed it in the successful people he interviewed, in their energy, their clarity, their resilience, in the way they treated their physical health not as a separate concern from their mental performance, but as the foundation of it. And then there is sex. Hill wrote about sexual energy with a directness that shocked readers in his era and would probably shock them today. He didn't treat it as a moral category. He didn't frame it in terms of sin or virtue, restraint or indulgence. He treated it as energy, as force. As one of the most powerful drives in human biology, a drive that, when properly directed, builds cathedrals, creates art, fuels ambition, and sustains the long, difficult work of genuine achievement. But here's what Hill understood that most people still don't. Sexual energy is not just about sex. It is the fundamental creative force of human existence. It is the energy that drives you to create, to build, to connect, to leave something behind that outlasts your own mortality. And when it is wasted, when it is dissipated in meaningless consumption, in compulsive behavior, in the endless pursuit of temporary gratification, it leaves you depleted. Not morally depleted, physically depleted, creatively depleted, unable to access the very force that might have powered your greatest work. Hill called this sublimation, the redirection of sexual energy into creative and constructive channels. And while the language feels dated, the concept is more relevant today than ever. In an age of infinite sexual stimulation, available instantly, anonymously, constantly, the capacity to direct this energy rather than be consumed by it is not a moral achievement. It is a competitive advantage. It is the difference between the person who has the vitality to build something lasting and the person who is too exhausted from consumption to create anything at all. I want to bring this back to David, the VP with the corner office and the warning signs he ignored. The man who treated his body like a rental car until his body finally refused to be ignored. David didn't become a wellness guru. He didn't start a fitness Instagram or write a book about his transformation. He just changed, slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and regressions and days when he fell back into old patterns. But the direction was clear, and the result was undeniable. 3 years after his health scare, David left his VP position, not because he had to, because he chose to. He started a smaller company, less money, less prestige, but aligned with his energy, his values, his biological reality. He works fewer hours now. He sleeps more. He cooks dinner for his family most nights. He runs in the mornings, not far, not fast, but consistently. And he told me something that I think captures everything we've been discussing. He said, "I used to think success was about overriding my body, about pushing through fatigue, ignoring hunger, suppressing emotions, treating my physical self as an obstacle to be overcome. Now I understand that success is about partnering with my body, listening to it, respecting its limits and its needs, using its energy rather than fighting against it. I accomplish less in a day now, by old metrics. But what I accomplish matters more, and I still have something left at the end of the day, for my family,
for myself, for the things that make life worth living. This is what Hill meant by sound health.
Not the pursuit of perfection. Not the optimization of every biomarker or the adherence to every wellness trend. Sound health is the integration of your physical existence with your deepest purpose. It is the recognition that your body is not separate from your mind. They are one system, one mind-body, and whatever affects one affects the other. It is the discipline to rest when you need rest, to move when you need movement, to nourish when you need nourishment, to express when you need expression. It is the wisdom to hear your body's signals before they become screams, and it is the foundation of clear thinking, of emotional resilience, of sustained creative output, of the capacity to handle stress without being destroyed by it, of the energy required to pursue a definite major purpose over the long arc of a life. Without this foundation, everything else we've discussed, the definiteness of purpose, the Mastermind Alliance, the creative vision, the capacity to learn from defeat, becomes theoretical. Beautiful ideas that your mind understands but your body cannot sustain. Aspirations that dissolve under the pressure of chronic depletion. Dreams that die not from lack of talent or opportunity, but from lack of the physical vitality required to bring them into being. Your body is not a rental car. It is not a machine to be driven until it breaks, then replaced or repaired at minimum cost. It is the only vehicle you will ever have for the journey of your life. The only instrument capable of playing the music that only you can hear. The only engine powerful enough to carry your vision from imagination into reality. Treat it accordingly. Not tomorrow. Not when the current project is finished. Not when you have more time. Today. Now. In the next decision you make about sleep, about movement, about nourishment, about rest. Because the next principle we're going to explore is about the resources that flow through this system, time and money, and how you allocate them reveals everything about who you are becoming. But you cannot allocate time wisely if you are too exhausted to think clearly. You cannot manage money effectively if you are making decisions from a state of chronic stress and depletion. The invisible ledger begins with the invisible engine, the mind-body that makes every other achievement possible. When we return, we enter the world of doers and drifters, of people who control their time and money with intention, and people who let both slip away while they're not paying attention. And I promise you this, by the end of the next chapter, you will never look at your calendar or your bank statement the same way again. End of chapter 15. Next chapter 16. The Invisible Ledger chapter. The Invisible Ledger. How you spend time and money reveals who you really are. I want you to imagine something, not a fantasy, not a visualization exercise. Something much more uncomfortable. Imagine that I could see your calendar. Every hour of the last 30 days. Every meeting you accepted. Every scroll session that lasted longer than you intended. Every morning you spent in bed staring at your phone instead of starting the day you had planned. Every evening you told yourself just one more episode, until it was midnight and you had work in 6 hours. Now imagine I could see your bank statement. Every transaction. Every subscription you forgot you had. Every impulse purchase made in a moment of stress or boredom. Every meal out because you were too depleted to cook. Every dollar that went toward making tomorrow slightly easier, while making next year slightly harder. If I had both of those documents, your calendar and your bank statement, could I write your autobiography? Not the autobiography you would write, the polished version, with the narrative arcs and the turning points and the moments of triumph. I mean the real autobiography. The one that shows who you actually are, not who you claim to be. The one that reveals your real priorities, your real values, your real relationship with the two resources that everyone says they never have enough of, time and money. And here's the question that matters. Would you want me to write it? Napoleon Hill understood something that most people never grasp, even after decades of living. Time and money are not separate categories. They are not independent resources that you manage with different tools and different mindsets. They are expressions of the same underlying reality, how you allocate your attention. Every dollar you spend is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every hour you invest is a deposit in the account of your future self. And every allocation, whether of time or money, reveals something about your deepest beliefs, that your words never will. Hill wrote, "Tell me how you use your time and how you spend your money, and I will tell you where and what you will be 10 years from now." This is not mysticism. This is simple arithmetic, applied to human behavior over time. The compound interest of choices.
the accumulation of small decisions into large destinies. Hill divided people into two categories. He called them doers and drifters. And while the language feels dated, the distinction is sharper today than it has ever been. The doer has a definite major purpose, not a vague intention, not a New Year's resolution that dissolves by February. A clear, specific, emotionally charged objective that organizes every other decision in their life. The drifter has no such purpose. They are controlled by circumstances rather than controlling them. They examine no idea before adopting or discarding it. They simply absorb whatever the algorithm serves them. They take no risks and accept no responsibility for their position in life. They make the same mistakes again and again, each time with a slightly different justification. They do only what it takes to get by, and they let their habits control them rather than controlling their habits. Now, here's what I want you to notice. The difference between a doer and a drifter is not intelligence. It's not talent. It's not education or background or privilege or luck. The difference is intentionality. The doer looks at their calendar and asks, does this align with my purpose? The drifter looks at their calendar and asks, do I have anything today? The doer looks at their bank statement and asks, is this moving me toward my goal? The drifter looks at their bank statement and asks, do I have enough to get through the month? One is playing offense. The other is playing defense. And over time, the compound effect of this difference is not incremental, it is exponential. Let me tell you about a man named William Sidney Porter. You've probably never heard that name, but you have heard the name he wrote under, O. Henry, one of the most popular short story writers in American history, the master of the twist ending, the writer who could make you laugh and break your heart in the same paragraph. But before he was O. Henry, William Sidney Porter was a prisoner. In 1896, he was convicted of embezzlement from the bank where he worked.
The details are disputed. Some historians believe he was guilty, others that he was covering for someone else. Still others that he was simply careless with accounts during a period of personal crisis. But the result was the same. 5 years in federal prison. Most people, in that situation, would have collapsed, or waited, or counted the days until release, and tried to survive with their sanity intact. Porter did something different. He looked at his time, all that time stretching ahead of him, empty and structured and unavoidable, and he made a decision. He would become a writer. Not eventually, not when he got out. Now, with the only resources he had, time, paper, and the determination to transform confinement into creation. He wrote constantly. Stories, sketches, observations of prison life. He sent them to magazines under his pen name, and they were accepted. Not out of pity, because they were good. Because he had found, in the most unlikely of circumstances, the alignment of time and talent and desperate necessity that produces genuine art. By the time he was released, Henry was already famous. He walked out of prison into a literary career that would make him immortal, not because prison was good for him, but because he refused to let a single hour of his time be wasted, even hours that most people would have considered already lost. This is the power of intentionality. Porter didn't have more time than any other prisoner. He didn't have better conditions. He didn't have connections or resources, or any of the advantages that people usually claim they need before they can start. What he had was a decision. A clear, irrevocable decision about how he would use the time that was given to him. Time that, by any conventional measure, was worthless. Time that most people would have treated as a sentence to endure, rather than a resource to invest. And that decision, that single act of taking possession of his own time, transformed everything. Now let's talk about how a doer actually uses time. Not in theory, not in motivational posters, but in the actual, granular, day-to-day reality of a life organized around purpose. A doer sees work as the source of all opportunity, not as a burden to be minimized, not as a transaction where time is exchanged for money at the most favorable rate possible, but as the primary arena in which they develop skill, build reputation, create value, and move toward their definite major purpose. This doesn't mean the doer is a workaholic. In fact, the doer is often less busy than the drifter, because the doer says no to almost everything that doesn't align with their purpose, while the drifter says yes to anything that fills the emptiness. A doer takes possession of their mind through self-discipline. They make plans, and they carry them out. They direct their attention toward the objects of their desire, and they keep their attention there, not perfectly, not always,
but consistently enough that progress becomes inevitable. They don't spend time thinking about what they don't want, because they understand that attention is the scarcest resource they possess, and they refuse to waste it on things that don't serve their purpose. A doer inspires cooperation from others by giving it first. They don't spend time arguing, nitpicking, or gossiping. They avoid people who do. They realize that defeatist attitudes are contagious, and they protect their mental environment with the same care that a surgeon protects an operating room, and a doer delegates. This is crucial, and almost everyone gets it wrong. The doer knows that you should never do anything which you can get someone else to do better than you can. Not because they are lazy, but because their time is too valuable to be spent on tasks that don't require their specific talents. They make themselves available to the people who are working with them, but they don't make themselves available to everyone, for everything, all the time. Now I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer honestly, not to me, but to yourself. How many hours last week did you spend on activities that moved you measurably closer to your full, definite major purpose? Not activities that felt productive. Not activities that kept you busy. Not activities that other people would consider impressive or necessary or responsible. Activities that actually moved the needle, that produced a tangible, verifiable result toward the thing you claim matters most. If you're like most people, the answer is embarrassing. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because you have never been taught to treat your time as the finite, non-renewable, irreplaceable resource that it actually is. Let me tell you about the 24-hour audit. It's simple, brutal, but simple. For 1 week, track every hour, not just work hours, not just productive hours. Every hour. Sleep, meals, commuting, scrolling, watching, talking, thinking, worrying, planning, executing, recovering, everything. At the end of the week, categorize each hour into one of 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1, important and urgent. These are the crises, the deadlines, the things that demand immediate attention and genuinely matter. Most people spend their lives here, reacting, firefighting, constantly stressed. Quadrant 2, important but not urgent. These are the activities that move you toward your purpose but don't have a deadline attached. Strategic planning, relationship building, skill development, health maintenance. This is where the doer lives. This is where the compound interest of small, consistent investments accumulates into life-changing results. Quadrant 3, urgent but not important. These are the interruptions, the other people's emergencies, the meetings that could have been emails, the notifications that demand your attention but serve no purpose you actually care about. The drifter lives here, busy, stressed, constantly in motion, achieving nothing. Quadrant 4, not urgent and not important. These are the time wasters, the doom scrolling, the binge watching, the compulsive checking of feeds that produce nothing but the temporary anesthesia of distraction. Everyone needs some of this. Rest is not waste. But when this quadrant dominates your life, you are not living. You are waiting. Waiting for something to happen, someone to rescue you, some opportunity to appear that you haven't earned and don't deserve. Hill recommended a specific daily structure. 1 hour of quiet meditation on your definite major purpose, your relationship with what he called infinite intelligence, your self-analysis, your relationships, and the things you desire rather than the things you fear. 2 hours of going the extra mile, rendering service to your community, your family, or your relationships without expecting any direct reward. 1 hour of study and reading for self-improvement. 1 hour in contact with members of your Mastermind Alliance or close personal friends. That leaves 3 hours for relaxation, recreation, exercise, and other responsibilities. Follow this 6 days a week. Reserve 1 day for nothing but mental and physical relaxation, religious or philosophical activities, and time with your family. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's 6 hours a day of structured activity, plus work, plus sleep. I don't have 6 hours. I have a job. I have children. I have obligations that don't fit into this neat little schedule. And you're right. You don't have 6 hours. Not if you continue doing everything you're currently doing. Not if you maintain every habit, every subscription, every social obligation, every time commitment that currently fills your days. But here's what Hill understood. You don't find time for what matters. You make time by saying no to what doesn't matter, by eliminating the Quadrant 3 and Quadrant 4 activities that consume your attention without advancing your purpose, by treating your time not as something that happens to you, but as something that you actively sculpt,
protect, and invest. Now let's talk about money. Because money, for all its complexity, is actually simpler than time. Time is finite and non-renewable. You can never earn back the hour you just spent. Money, at least theoretically, can be earned again. But the principles of allocation are the same. Hill's first rule of money management: pay yourself first. Not after you've paid everyone else. Not after you've covered your expenses and seen what's left. First, before anything else.
A fixed percentage of every dollar that comes to you, 10%, minimum, goes into savings before you spend a penny on anything else. This is not about accumulating wealth for its own sake. It is about building the psychological and practical foundation that makes everything else possible. A strong savings cushion is an important weapon against the fear of poverty, one of the 7 basic fears that Hill identified as paralyzing more potential than almost any other force. When adversity strikes, adequate savings allow you to respond with strategy rather than panic, to look for the seed of equivalent benefit rather than desperately grasping at the first available option. Hill also recommended adequate life insurance if others depend on you, not because death is likely, but because the cost of a good policy is trivial compared to the anguish you would inflict on your dependents by leaving them unprotected. This is not pessimism. It is love, expressed in the language of preparation. And he recommended allocating some portion of your income to charity, not as a tax strategy, not as a reputation management tool, but as a recognition that you are part of a larger system, and that your success depends on the health of that system. What right do you have to expect help if you have never given it? What claim can you make on the generosity of others if you have not cultivated generosity yourself? But here's where most people fail with money. It's not that they don't know what to do. Everyone knows they should save more, spend less, avoid debt, invest wisely. The knowledge is universal. The execution is rare. Why? Because money is emotional. More emotional than almost any other topic. More emotional than sex, more emotional than politics, more emotional than religion for many people. And until you understand the emotional architecture of your relationship with money, no budget will work, no system will stick, no amount of knowledge will translate into behavior. The person who spends impulsively is not lacking information. They are medicating anxiety. The purchase produces a dopamine hit that temporarily relieves the stress they don't know how to process. The new thing feels like progress, like control, like a small victory in a life that otherwise feels out of control. The person who avoids looking at their bank account is not lazy. They are afraid of what the numbers will confirm about their choices, their worth, their future. And the avoidance, while producing temporary comfort, guarantees that the situation will get worse, which produces more fear, which produces more avoidance, in a spiral that ends in financial catastrophe. The person who lives in debt is not necessarily irresponsible. They may be operating from a scarcity mindset so deep that they genuinely cannot imagine a future where they have enough. And when you cannot imagine abundance, you act from scarcity, which produces more scarcity, which confirms your belief, which deepens the pattern. Hill understood this. He didn't write about money management as a set of rules to be followed. He wrote about it as a reflection of mental state, as an external manifestation of internal beliefs, as evidence of whether you have taken possession of your own mind or whether your mind is still controlled by fears, habits, and influences that you have never examined. The person with a positive mental attitude toward money sees it as a tool, a means of exchange, a form of energy that flows toward those who create value and away from those who don't. They don't worship it, and they don't fear it. They use it, consciously and intentionally, to advance their purpose and serve others. The person with a negative mental attitude toward money sees it as a source of anxiety, a measure of worth, a weapon to be hoarded, or a trap to be escaped. They either obsess over it or avoid thinking about it. They either spend compulsively or hoard pathologically. They are controlled by it, rather than controlling it. And the transformation, the only transformation that lasts, begins not with a budget, but with a belief. The belief that you are capable of creating value, that the universe is not fundamentally scarce, that your financial situation is a reflection of your mental habits, and that your mental habits can be changed. Let me bring this back to the invisible ledger. Your calendar and your bank statement are not just records. They are ledgers, accounting documents that show, with mathematical precision, what you actually value, as opposed to what you claim to value. And the gap between those two things is where most human suffering lives. The person who says they want to write a novel, but spends 0 hours writing. The person who says they want financial freedom but spends every dollar on immediate gratification. The person who says they want deep relationships but spends their evenings alone with a screen. The person who says they want health but treats their body like a rental car. These are not hypocrites. They are human beings caught in the gap between intention and behavior. And the only way to close that gap is to make the invisible visible, to track, to measure, to confront the evidence of your own choices with the same rigor you would apply to auditing a business. Because you are a business. You are the sole proprietor of your life, the CEO of your time, the CFO of your money. And if you are not managing these resources with the same care that a competent executive manages their company, you are not being humble, you are being negligent. Hill's final insight about time and money is perhaps his most important. He understood that habits are the bridge between knowledge and behavior. That you don't change your financial situation by making one good decision, you change it by making good decisions automatic. That you don't reclaim your time by trying harder, you reclaim it by building systems that make productive use inevitable and wasteful use difficult. This is where the final principle comes in. The principle that ties everything together. The invisible force that makes your habits serve you or destroy you, that shapes your destiny while you sleep, that operates whether you are aware of it or not. Hill called it cosmic habit force, and it sounds mystical, but it is actually the most practical, mechanical, undeniable force in the entire philosophy of success. It is the law that makes every living creature, every particle of matter, subject to the influence of its environment. The law that makes stars move in orbits and sunflowers turn toward light, and humans become whatever their repeated actions make them. The law that says, you are not what you intend to be. You are what you repeatedly do. And that law, that invisible, inexorable cosmic habit force, is what we will explore next. Not as philosophy, not as mysticism, but as engineering, as the operating system of human behavior, as the force that, once understood, can be directed, shaped, and used to build a life that aligns with your deepest purpose. But be warned. Once you understand how habit force works, you can never again claim that your life is the result of circumstances beyond your control. You can never again say, I am the way I am, because of my childhood, my environment, my genes, my luck. Because you will know, with the certainty of physics, that you are the way you are, because of your habits. And your habits are the one thing over which you have complete control. When we return, we enter the architecture of destiny itself. The force that makes you who you are, whether you choose it or not, and the method for choosing it. Deliberately, consciously, irreversibly. End of Chapter 16. Next, Chapter 17. The Invisible Hand. Chapter. The Invisible Hand. Cosmic. Habit force and the architecture of destiny. There is a force that governs everything, not a metaphor, not a spiritual abstraction, not something that requires belief or faith or any kind of mystical disposition. A physical force. A mechanical force, a force as real as gravity, as demonstrable as inertia, as observable as the orbit of planets around the sun. It operates whether you know about it or not, whether you believe in it or not, whether you want it to or not. It has been shaping your life since the moment you were born. It is shaping your life right now, in this very second, as you listen to these words. And it will continue to shape your life until the moment you die, unless you learn to see it, understand it, and direct it. Napoleon Hill called it cosmic habit force, and the name sounds mystical, but what it describes is the most practical, mechanical, undeniable truth in the entire philosophy of personal achievement. Consider the sunflower, not a complicated organism, no nervous system, no brain, no capacity for choice or intention or willpower. And yet, every single day, without fail, the sunflower turns its face toward the light. It doesn't decide to do this. It doesn't think about it. It doesn't struggle with motivation or discipline or any of the human concerns that occupy our minds. It simply follows the force that governs its existence. The force of phototropism. The biological habit that makes light-seeking not a choice, but a nature. Now consider the planet Pluto, 5 billion kilometers from the sun. So distant that light takes over 4 hours to reach it. And yet, for billions of years, Pluto has followed the same elliptical path around the sun with mathematical precision. It doesn't deviate. It doesn't get bored and try a different orbit. It doesn't have bad days where it decides to stay in bed. It follows its nature, its established pattern, its cosmic habit. And here is the terrifying, liberating, unavoidable truth. You are no different. You are where you are and what you are because of your established habits. Not because of your circumstances. Not because of your childhood. Not because of your genetics, or your luck, or the opportunities that did or didn't come your way.
Those things matter. They shape the starting conditions, but they do not determine the trajectory. The trajectory is determined by habit, by the repeated actions, thoughts, and emotional patterns that have become so automatic that you no longer even notice them. Hill wrote, "Cosmic habit force is the law which makes every living creature, every particle of matter, subject to the influence of its environment." Read that carefully. Subject to the influence of its environment. Not influenced by, not affected by. Subject to, dominated by, controlled by, at the mercy of. Your environment is not a backdrop to your life. It is the sculptor of your habits. And your habits are the architects of your destiny. Let me tell you a story that Hill told. It's about a woman who worked the swing shift at an electronics assembly plant. She was allowed 2 10-minute breaks, one at 6 p.m., one at 10:30 p.m. Most of her coworkers used these breaks for cigarettes, but she didn't smoke. She didn't want to start, so she decided to have a snack instead. Her garden was in full bloom, so she would bring something she had grown herself. A carrot, an apple, something fresh, something natural, something that connected her to the earth while she worked in a fluorescent-lit factory. Every day, at precisely 6 p.m. and precisely 10:30 p.m., she ate her snack. Same time, same place, same ritual. As the months passed, something happened that she didn't plan and didn't expect. She started getting hungry before her breaks. Not just casually hungry, urgently hungry. She would watch the clock, waiting for 6 p.m., feeling the anticipation build in her body like a physical force. Sometimes it seemed the time would never come. When her garden stopped producing, she switched to whatever she had at home. A candy bar, a donut, cookies from the vending machine. The habit had formed. The neural pathway had been carved. The cosmic habit force had taken over. And now, regardless of what she consciously wanted, her body demanded food at 6 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., with the same inevitability that the sunflower demands light. But here's where the story gets interesting. She started gaining weight. She felt distracted from her work for half an hour before each break, her mind consumed by the anticipation of eating. She realized that what had begun as a positive choice, avoiding cigarettes, eating fresh food, had become a negative pattern that was harming her. So she decided to stop. She stopped bringing food. She told herself she would simply not eat during her breaks anymore. It didn't work. The vending machines were right there. The habit was stronger than her intention. She started buying snacks from the machines, spending more money, eating worse food, reinforcing the very pattern she wanted to escape. At this point, most people give up. They accept the habit as part of who they are. They say, "I guess I'm just someone who snacks," or "I have no willpower," or "This is just how I'm wired." They surrender to the cosmic habit force and let it carry them wherever it will. But this woman didn't surrender. She did something that most people never do. She seized possession of her own mind. She set a definite minor purpose, to break the snacking habit. Not a vague intention. Not, "I should eat less." A specific, measurable, time-bound objective. "I will not eat during my breaks for 30 days. And she replaced the habit rather than simply trying to eliminate it. When her break came, she reached for a book instead of a candy bar. She substituted the desire for knowledge and inspiration for the desire for food. Same frequency, 6 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. Same environmental cue, the break bell, the factory floor, the 10-minute window. But a different behavior, a different reward, a different pathway through the same neural landscape. At first, the hunger persisted. The old habit fought back. Her body demanded the familiar dopamine hit, the familiar oral gratification, the familiar ritual of consumption. But after a few days, something shifted. She acquired an appetite for reading that overwhelmed the old physical desire. She started looking forward to her breaks not for the food, but for the ideas. The new habit had taken root. The cosmic habit force had been redirected, and the old habit, starved of repetition, began to wither and die. This is the core insight of cosmic habit force. Habits are not moral failures. They are not evidence of weak character or insufficient willpower. They are the natural, inevitable result of repeated behavior in a consistent environment. They are physics, not philosophy. They operate according to laws as reliable as gravity, and they are subject to the same kind of engineering. Hill identified 3 essentials for establishing any habit. First, plasticity, the capacity to change. the ability to take a new form and hold it until the next change is made. Not like Mercury, which takes any shape for a moment but never keeps it, but like modeling clay, malleable but capable of holding whatever shape you give it. You have plasticity. Everyone has plasticity. It is the fundamental property of the human nervous system. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your experiences, your thoughts, your actions. Neuroplasticity is not a theory. It is a measurable, observable, scientific fact. And it means that no habit is permanent. No pattern is unchangeable. No destiny is fixed. Second, frequency of impression. Repetition. The mother of habit. The more often you repeat a behavior, the faster it becomes automatic. The more consistently you perform an action in the same context, the more deeply it becomes encoded in your neural architecture. This is why sporadic efforts fail. The person who goes to the gym once a week is not building a habit. They are performing an actional action. The person who writes only when they feel inspired is not building a habit. They are waiting for external conditions to align. The person who meditates when they have time is not building a habit. They are engaging in a discretionary activity. Habits require frequency, daily, ideally. At minimum, regularly enough that the behavior becomes the default rather than the exception. Third, intensity of impression, concentration. The depth of attention you bring to the behavior while you are performing it. You can go through the motions of an activity, or you can pour your full awareness into it. The latter builds the habit much faster, because it encodes the behavior more deeply in your memory and your emotional system. The woman in the factory didn't just casually read during her breaks. She immersed herself in the reading. She let the ideas absorb her attention completely. She made the substitution not just behavioral, but emotional. And that intensity, that full engagement, is what allowed the new habit to override the old one. Now, here's what makes cosmic habit force so dangerous. It works whether your habits are positive or negative, whether they serve your purpose or destroy it, whether you are aware of them or completely blind to their operation. If your dominating mental habits are thoughts of poverty, cosmic habit force will bring poverty into your life. Not because of magic, not because the universe is punishing you for negative thinking, but because poverty consciousness shapes your perceptions, your decisions, your risk tolerance, your willingness to seize opportunity, your capacity to create value. It makes you see scarcity where others see abundance. It makes you hesitate where others act. It makes you settle where others strive. And over time, these small, repeated decisions compound into a life of limitation. If your dominating mental habits are thoughts of prosperity and peace, cosmic habit force will bring those into your life. Not because of magic, not because the universe is rewarding you for positive thinking, but because prosperity consciousness shapes your perceptions, your decisions, your risk tolerance, your willingness to seize opportunity, your capacity to create value. It makes you see possibility where others see obstacle. It makes you act where others hesitate. It makes you strive where others settle. And over time, these small, repeated decisions compound into a life of expansion. The mechanism is identical, only the direction differs. And the direction is determined by your habits. Hill warned about inflexible habits, and his warning is more relevant today than it was in his time. Because the world is changing faster than ever before, and the habits that made you successful yesterday may be the habits that destroy you tomorrow. Consider American Express in the 1980s. They were the premier charge card. A symbol of prestige, of success, of having arrived. Millions of members. Acceptance at virtually every business that mattered. A brand so powerful that it seemed unassailable. But the economy changed. Consumers became more price conscious. Credit cards with no annual fee, Visa, MasterCard, began offering similar benefits without the premium cost. Merchants became frustrated with American Express's higher transaction fees and slower payment processing. And American Express didn't change. They kept doing business the way they had always done it, because the habits that had made them successful were now so deeply ingrained that they couldn't imagine operating any other way. They were subject to their own cosmic habit force, and that force was carrying them toward destruction. Cardholder numbers fell dramatically. In Boston, restaurants organized an actual boycott. Profits disappeared. Losses mounted. The company that had once defined premium financial services was now fighting for its survival. The habits that had made American Express great were not the habits that would keep them great. Their habits ruled them, rather than them ruling their habits. And cosmic habit force, that impartial, mechanical force, carried out the pattern they had established.
all the way to the edge of collapse. This is the danger that awaits anyone who builds success without building flexibility into their habits. The person who becomes successful through relentless hard work, but never develops the habit of rest. The person who builds a business through personal charisma, but never develops the habit of systems. The person who achieves through aggressive risk-taking, but never develops the habit of caution. The person who thrives in one environment, but never develops the habit of adaptation. Cosmic habit force doesn't care about your past success. It doesn't reward loyalty to what worked before. It simply executes the pattern. And if the pattern is no longer aligned with reality, the pattern will destroy you. But here is the other side of cosmic habit force. The side that makes this principle not a prison, but a key. Not a sentence, but a tool. Not a force to be feared, but a force to be directed. If habits are the architects of destiny, then you are the architect of your habits. If cosmic habit force operates automatically, then your job is to program it deliberately. If your environment shapes your behavior, then your behavior can shape your environment. Hill outlines specific steps for using cosmic habit force to build the life you want. First, create a clear mental image of your desired outcome. Not a lot of money, not more success. A concrete figure, a specific percentage, a measurable target. The more vivid, the more detailed, the more emotionally charged this image is, the more powerfully cosmic habit force will work to bring it into being. Second, imagine the results of achieving this outcome. The home you would own, the experiences you would have, the security you would feel, the people you would help, the motives that drive you. Not just wealth, but recognition, freedom, self-expression, the desire to create something that outlasts your mortality. Third, decide how you will earn this outcome. You cannot get something for nothing. Cosmic habit force does not reward wishful thinking. It rewards patterns of behavior that produce value. What is your plan? What service will you render? What skills will you develop? What problems will you solve? Fourth, write it out. Sign it. Make it a contract with yourself. Not because the paper has magic power, but because the act of writing forces clarity. It exposes the gaps between your desires and your plans. It makes the invisible visible. It transforms vague intention into definite commitment. Fifth, identify everything you need to do that you are not currently doing. The daily actions, the weekly reviews, the monthly assessments, the behaviors that, repeated consistently, will produce the outcome you desire. Sixth, start doing them. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect. Now, today, this hour, because cosmic habit force does not respond to intention, it responds to action. Seventh, read your goal aloud every day, morning and night, when you wake and before you sleep. Not as a ritual of magic, but as a ritual of focus. A way of keeping your mind oriented toward the pattern you are trying to establish. A way of impressing your subconscious with the image you want it to work toward. And here's the final truth about cosmic habit force. The truth that ties together every principle we've explored in this documentary. You are not a victim of your habits. You are the creator of them. And the only thing standing between the person you are and the person you could become is the gap between what you know and what you do. Knowledge without action is not power. It is potential energy, stored, inert, useless, until it is converted into motion. And the conversion happens through habit, through the daily, repeated, often boring behaviors that most people dismiss as too small to matter. The person who reads 1 page a day will read 365 pages in a year. The person who saves $10 a day will save $3,650 in a year. The person who practices one skill for 30 minutes a day will have practiced for 182 hours in a year. The person who reaches out to one potential connection a day will have 365 new relationships in 3 things. These numbers seem small. They seem insignificant. They seem like nothing compared to the grand visions that most people hold in their minds. But cosmic habit force doesn't work through grand visions. It works through repetition, through frequency, through the compound interest of small actions, repeated consistently, until they become automatic, until they become nature, until they become destiny. Hill ended his book with a line that has been quoted millions of times. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, your mind can achieve. But he knew, and you now know, that this is not the whole story. Conception is not enough. Belief is not enough. Even burning desire is not enough. What is required is alignment. Alignment between your vision and your habits, between your beliefs and your behaviors,
between what you want and what you repeatedly do, between the person you imagine yourself to be and the person that your daily actions are actually creating. When these are aligned, cosmic habit force becomes your ally, the invisible hand that carries you toward your destination while you sleep, while you work, while you live. The force that makes success not a struggle, but a natural consequence of who you have become. When they are not aligned, cosmic habit force becomes your enemy, the invisible hand that carries you away from your dreams while you are busy wishing for them. The force that makes failure not an accident, but an inevitable result of patterns you never examined. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. It will always be yours. Not because the universe is fair, not because success is guaranteed, but because the one thing over which you have complete control, the only thing, is your thoughts. And your thoughts, repeated, become your habits. And your habits, sustained, become your destiny.
So the question is not whether cosmic habit force will shape your life. It will. It already is. It never stops. The question is, what pattern are you establishing? What habits are you building? What destiny are you creating? One repeated action at a time. And the answer to that question is not found in what you intend. It is not found in what you hope for, or what you dream about, or what you plan to do someday. It is found in what you did today, what you will do tomorrow, what you will do the day after that, and the day after that, until the pattern becomes so automatic that you no longer even think about it. That is cosmic habit force. That is the architecture of destiny. That is the invisible hand that has been shaping human lives since the beginning of time. And that power, that force, that inevitable mechanical truth is now in your hands. Use it. End of chapter 17. Next, conclusion. Alignment is the only real freedom. Chapter, the choice, that remains. You have listened to 8 chapters, 8 principles, 8 doorways into a different way of being. And now, the only question that matters. What will you do with what you have heard? Not tomorrow, not next week, not when the timing is better. Now. Because knowledge that is not acted upon is not knowledge. It is entertainment. And entertainment changes nothing. There is a reason that most people who read books about success do not become successful. It is not because the books are wrong.
It is because reading feels like action. It is not. Action is action. And action is the only thing that cosmic habit force responds to. You can know everything about accurate thinking and still think inaccurately. You can understand the power of focus and still allow distraction. You can admire teamwork and still try to do everything alone. Knowledge is not transformation. Only action transforms. So here is what I want you to do. Right now, before this video ends, choose one principle, just one. The one that spoke to you most clearly. The one that made you uncomfortable. The one you know you need most. And commit to one action. One small, specific, measurable action. Today, not a plan. Not an intention. An action. Because the person who acts once is more powerful than the person who plans perfectly and never moves. There is a final truth that I want to leave with you. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too damaged. You are not too ordinary. Every person you have heard about in this documentary started somewhere, with something or with nothing. The only difference between them and everyone else was not talent, not luck, not circumstance. It was the decision to act, repeatedly, consistently, against resistance, against doubt, against the voice that says, not yet. That voice will always be there. It is not your enemy. It is the resistance that makes you stronger, but only if you move through it. Only if you act despite it. Only if you prove, through repeated action, that the voice is wrong. And eventually, cosmic habit force will take over. The action will become automatic. The resistance will become fuel. The person you are becoming will feel inevitable. This is not the end of a video. This is the beginning of a choice. Your choice. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, your mind can achieve. But only if you act. Only if you persist. Only if you refuse to let this moment become just another piece of content you consumed and forgot. The story continues with you. Write the next chapter. Now. End of documentary.